Welcome into Fantasy Football Night in America, ladies and gentlemen. It is the Better Sports Network's high-stakes fantasy football show. We are going to be with you from now until 9 p.m. Eastern Time tonight, taking you through roughly the first quarter of tonight's Steelers-Patriots game as we get set for a Bafo weekend of Week 14 fantasy football in the National Football League. Hi, hello, everybody. I am Eric Balkman. You follow me on the X at Eric Balkman. I am, of course, from the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the Fantasy Football Players Championship, and the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown. My guest host tonight, you've seen him on these airwaves before. He is the incomparable, the intelligent, the open-minded Dave Kluge at Dave Kluge on the X from Footballguys at Footballguys, footballguys.com. Dave, welcome in, man. So glad to have you tonight.
Yeah, always a good time talking ball with you. Haven't been on an in-season show yet. We've done a bunch throughout the off-season, so really excited to talk about tonight's exhilarating matchup. I mean, am I overselling it at all? Like, matchup
Yes.
of the year. How about it?
You are overselling it. And, oh, by the way, I think that was an email from Roger Goodell just sending you a job offer with the National Football League here. Yeah, it's so we are into, Week 14, obviously, fantasy playoffs coming up for a lot of people. I know with the FFPC, championship round is we're on the cusp of it here. Dave, how has the fantasy season gone for you this year?
Good and bad. I've been able to navigate through a lot of bad decisions that I made in draft season. One of my biggest takes in the offseason was drafting Cooper Kupp, trying not to get scared off by the injury, buying the discount on Cooper Kupp. And that's been a pretty tough one to overcome. You spend a high second round pick on a guy like Cooper Kupp and getting almost no production from him. I mean, we got that little tease when he came back from his injury, and we got 2 games, and we said, huzzah, Cooper Kupp is back. And then averaging 27 points per game since. It has been bleak is an understatement. It's been pretty tough dealing through that. But, you just keep working the waiver wire. Kyren Williams was a guy that I picked up. Didn't really have the highest hopes for. There were some concerns about his early season efficiency metrics and whatnot, but he has been a great pickup so far. One of my smarter moves this year, though, something that has really helped me a lot, was punting on early quarterbacks. I thought this year we were getting a little over our skis, and I believe you and I talked about this in the offseason.
We did.
These guys going in the second and third round, and I said, the opportunity cost you're giving up at other positions just seems a little bit crazy there. So lucking out and stumbling into guys like Sam Howell and Brock Purdy later in drafts makes it a little bit easier to overcome the Cooper Kupp whiff.
How surprised are you to see that Sam Howell, I know he was coming into Week 13. I don't know if he still is. Sam Howell leading the NFL in passing. I mean, have we ever had he's not a journeyman because he's only been with one team, but have we ever had a lower pedigreed player, for lack of a better phrase, lead the NFL in passing? This is blowing my mind.
Yeah, really bizarre. I mean, early in the offseason, I was saying that Jacoby Brissett was going to win the job in camp. That's kind of what I expected. I didn't really have any hopes for Sam Howell at all. And I don't know if it's the Eric Bieniemy effect or what it is, but it's not like he is just being propped up by a group of weapons or anything like that. I mean, he is resuscitating life into Curtis Samuel. He's finally helping Jahan Dotson look better than we saw last year. Terry McLaurin's having a great year as well. Like, he is elevating the talent around him. He's not leaning on one guy. He's getting everybody in the offense involved. Yeah, definitely one of the biggest surprises of the season. But when I was kind of taking that approach where I was punting on these early quarterbacks, I didn't really have a lot of guys that I was targeting. It was kind of a shotgun approach. So I was getting some Jordan Love here, some Russell Wilson here, some Sam Howell here. And it just seems like that was one of the better strategies to have this year.
I want to talk about that for a second, because for me in my leagues, I always wait on quarterback. I think I told Matt Kelly this from Player Profiler. I often wait on quarterback to the point of being a dick about it, for, again, lack of a better phrase. And last year I changed that philosophy slightly. I got bit bad because I would wait till 10, 11 quarterbacks are off the board, and then I would take my quarterback there, and I would not get a backup. And I primarily play in 12-team, 20-man roster leagues, which I'm fine with. One quarterback, we'll figure it out. Single quarterback start, I can live with it. However, Matthew Stafford goes down early last year. Dak Prescott goes down early last year. I said, I can't let this happen again. I still didn't buy in, even though there was a narrative out there saying you have to get one. It was sort of like getting the elite tight end, right? You want to get one of the elite tight ends or you want to wait. Well, this year it was you want to get one of the elite quarterbacks or you want to wait. Well, I really didn't get the elite quarterbacks this year, but I made darn sure to double up. If I took a quarterback as the 10th or 11th guy off the board, I was getting the 13th guy off the board. I was getting the 14th guy off the board. That has sort of been my strategy this year. It's paid off. I got Brock Purdy in a lot of spots. That's been helpful. Missed on Sam Howell. But can you kind of talk a little bit about your philosophy as far as drafting quarterbacks go, how you did it this year? Was that how you normally do it, Dave? Or was this a departure from how you normally draft quarterbacks in your leagues?
No, anytime I don't get one of those elite onesie positions, a quarterback or a tight end, like, don't get me wrong. I draft a lot of leagues, and every once in a while, I couldn't pass on the cost for a guy like Josh Allen or Justin Fields or Justin Herbert that would fall into my lap, and I'd make those picks. But if I wasn't getting a good enough cost on one of those guys at the onesie positions, I always double tap in the later rounds. It's really simple. You don't have to overthink it. You're doubling your chances of hitting on that late round guy. If you take one guy, you're hoping that he's going to pan out. But if you take two guys, you double your chances. But realistically, we're talking about guys that popped up on the waiver wire that we weren't even thinking about drafting. Who was drafting Josh Dobbs this year, who you got QB1 production from a big chunk of the season? Who was drafting Sam Howell? I mean, even we're talking about him a lot. He's a guy that realistically was getting picked up off of waivers after the first couple of weeks in a lot of leagues. Right now we're seeing these guys that you didn't even have to draft. So I think if you aren't going to have the security of a Josh Allen, of a Jalen Hurts, of one of these guys, one, you want to draft two to double your chances. And two, as soon as week one is over, you want to start seeing who shows some promise. Jordan Love probably went in a lot of leagues, but if you're talking like in a single quarterback league with 20 spots, Jordan Love might not have been rostered, but you knew immediately after week one, this is a guy who I want on my team who has high upside every single week. So draft two to double your chances, and then also scour the waiver wire early.
I think the other thing too, and like Stroud is another guy that he was drafted late in best balls. But he was drafted late in best balls. But when you talk about like managed leagues, I think that this was a guy that the smart people picked him up week one, week two, or whatever, and they're reaping the benefits of that. Will they continue? We'll get into that on the show tonight because I have my reservations about CJ Stroud in week 14. Yes, I do. Coming up on tonight's show, we're going to get into everything that you need to know about setting your lineups for week 14 in the FFPC. Dave is going to help me out with my BettorCast, aka BenderCast, picks tonight, as Howard Bender will be with you on the Better Sports Network app through the duration of tonight's Patriots Steelers matchup. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to hit those over-unders. We're going to hit up who Dave thinks is going to win tonight's game. And then in the second hour, we're going to find out where Dave stands on certain players like Chubba Hubbard, like Kenneth Walker, Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts. The list goes on there. We'll hit up on that, and then lineup advice coming up in the final segment before we bid you adieu into that good night with Dallas Goedert, Rachaad White, David Njoku, Noah Brown, and much more. So let's kick things off tonight, Dave, with Travis Etienne. Officially limited in practice this week with the rib injury. I don't necessarily think he's a guy you want to bench, but how and we could talk about the FFPC weekly challenge here too, of how attractive a pick Travis Etienne is from a weekly standpoint. He's dealing with the rib injury, unknown at quarterback, probably not going to be Trevor Lawrence, non-zero chance. It might not be CJ Beathard as well. What do you do with Travis Etienne if you have him in season long this week? Is he a guy you just gotta put him in and hope for the best, or is this a more nuanced decision?
Yeah, I'm looking right now trying to pull up the Thursday practice report. I thought I had that available, and I'm not. Do we know if he practiced today? I know he was limited yesterday, but
he was limited again today. 2 straight limited practices.
That's usually nothing that I get too concerned about. Ribs, as we've seen a lot of these times, it is more of just a pain tolerance type of thing. And I don't think there's anything that indicates that he's not going to play yet. But with these guys who are logging limited practices throughout the week, we really don't get a super clear picture until Friday. So we'll try to, take a look at that practice report tomorrow. But assuming he's limited again tomorrow, that probably means he's playing. Hopefully we see him upgraded to a full participant and don't have any concerns at all. But this team has shown that they're willing to trot out Dearness Johnson a little bit. And there were those preseason concerns about Tank Bigsby, who I don't know if we can use the term bust on a guy like Tank Bigsby yet, but he's been pretty terrible. It seems like Dearness Johnson is carving out the role that we're concerned Tank Bigsby would have. So if he's not at 100%, there is some concern there. Dearness Johnson's look good, and he's going to see a bigger role if Travis Etienne's limited. But I think the only difference is that rather than looking at Travis Etienne as a top 5, top 6, top 7 guy, we're looking at him as more of a high-end RB2, low-end RB1. I don't think many people are in a position where they have enough running backs that they can bench Travis Etienne.
That's the thing, like, right? Because I mean, you look at players you could have ahead that you might have on your roster that you might want to play ahead of Travis Etienne. Certainly, Javonte Williams is possible. Kyren Williams, obviously, Devon
Absolutely, yeah.
Achane. You can make the case for Rashad White, Isaiah Pacheco, Zach Moss is another guy. I think all those guys would start. They would strike strong cases to start them over Travis Etienne. You may not have all those guys, but you might have one or two. The matchup at Cleveland, does that give you pause at all, Dave?
Absolutely. But again, this is Travis Etienne is bordering on that stud territory where you just have to ride the highs with the highs and the lows with the lows. At any time, he can go for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns, and you don't want to be looking at that on your bench. So obviously the floor and ceiling are both limited a little bit. We've seen that Cleveland has been a grinder, but we're also seeing that they are throwing a little bit more with Joe Flacco under center. So hopefully that leads to a quicker pace of play. Hopefully it can lead to maybe some potential turnovers, get the ball in Jacksonville's hands a little bit more. Even more concerned about than the matchup, though, would be the potential that Trevor Lawrence doesn't play. And we're looking at CJ Beathard, because CJ Beathard under center just kind of knocks everybody down a couple of pegs. So, we're sitting here, it's all doom and gloom, Travis Etienne dealing with the injury, tough matchup, CJ Beathard possibly starting. But like I said, I don't think many people are in a position where they can bench Travis Etienne. So looking at my rankings right now, I've still got Travis Etienne as a high-end RB2, which, like I said, doesn't mean that many people are in a position where they can feel comfortable benching him. But some of the guys that I would feel comfortable with, if you have them, you already mentioned Kyren Williams, already mentioned Javonte Williams. Ahead of that, Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley. I've got Devin Achane ahead of him. I've got Rashad White ahead of him. I've got Bijan Robinson ahead of him. So there aren't a lot of teams that have 2 or 3 of those guys. So at worst, you're probably plugging Travis Etienne into your flex spot.
I think that's the thing we need to understand here. Matchup is important. Injury status is important. Offense is important. Obviously, with an unknown quarterback leading the way, but talent is still factoring into this as well. There is maybe 1 or 2 leagues where I am benching Travis Etienne, and quite frankly, I haven't made up my mind on that. I still might start him there. So that is what we're looking at with Travis Etienne. What about the wide receiver? There is with the FFPC waivers going off last night, Dave, one of the most grabbed wide receivers off waivers was Parker Washington. And why wouldn't he be? A player that has been working with CJ Beathard pretty much all season. And we've seen the backup quarterback throw to the second string and third string wide receivers quite a bit on the field. Parker Washington did not disappoint this past Monday against Cincinnati. Looked really good. It's like 6 for like 80 and a touchdown, something like that. And
remarkable touchdown too.
But yeah, it was like the hand-eye coordination. The concentration on that one was crazy. With Christian Kirk basically being, he didn't practice today. We don't anticipate him coming back anytime soon. What about Parker Washington this week? Obviously he's a player. If your waivers are still open, you want to make sure you grab him. But at the same time, is this the time to deploy him as a flex this week?
It's really tough to get cute at this time in the season, right? Like, this is when you need to win. Like, you don't have time to see, like, let's see how this guy develops. You got to win this week. You got to win next week. This is the time of year where every win matters, and a loss pretty much ends your season here. So I do have some excitement for Parker Washington. I think that he is a pretty good player, but am I firing him up in leagues? I'd have to be pretty desperate. Looking at my rankings, he is down in the Trey Palmer, Jalen Guyton, Cedric Tillman area where, if you're starting guys like that, and that's what your start-sit decision is at in week 13, you're probably already setting your eyes to 2024. So it's possible. Like you said, there's the connection with the backup, CJ Beathard. They probably got some reps together in camp. But I want to say that Trevor Lawrence was looking Parker Washington's way as well. So it wasn't just with Beathard. He was getting looks from both of these guys. Kind of surprising he doesn't have a single reception all year and then just breaks out of nowhere in week 13. But again, like we said, if CJ Beathard is the guy starting here, kind of diminishing expectations for everybody in Jacksonville a little bit. And I'd feel shaky about starting Calvin Ridley, which means I'd feel really shaky about starting Parker Washington.
What about let's talk about let's do this. We'll get to Dalton Schultz and the Texans in a second. Let's go to Permar 99's chat in YouTube right now. So two-part question here, or 2 separate questions, I should say. His roster is locked this Sunday. It's a keeper league. Would you drop Dalvin Cook in that league to pick up John Mechie? Cook would be his 5th running back. Mechie would be his 8th receiver. So I don't think, and Permar probably understands this is not a life-changing decision as far as this league goes. I don't know how big of an impact either one of these guys would have. I have been told by several FFPC high stakes dynasty players, you always want to acquire as many ascending assets as you can. And to me, Mechie, I don't know if either one of these guys is an ascending asset, Dave, but if there's one, it's Mechie. Dalvin Cook, what he has exhibited this year gives me no faith for the future. I am still team Abanikanda. I feel like, I don't know about the rest of this season, but 2024, I feel like he's going to have a role in this backfield. So to me, I would drop Cook to pick up Mechie. I might just be a lateral move. But, I mean, that's the thing. It's like we're looking for upside here. There's very little with Cook. There could be some with Mechie.
Yeah, and I think that's it. Me personally, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to pick the running back over the wide receiver at this point in the season because we can see running back suddenly thrusted into a role. But I think even if Breece Hall went down, I don't think that we're looking at a workhorse role for Dalvin Cook. And even if we are, like, what does a workhorse role on the New York Jets even matter at this point? Like, Breece Hall is one of the most talented running backs in the world, and he is still giving us middling RB2 production. You take his workload and you put it in Dalvin Cook's lap, and I don't know if he's any better than a what the heck RB3 there. And then, like you said, Izzy Abanikanda is probably the better of the two. So even if something happens to Breece Hall, Dalvin Cook is likely in a spot where he's splitting touches with Izzy Abanikanda. I think here, especially with Tank Dell being out for the rest of the season, somebody's going to have to step up. And Noah Brown, he's looked okay in spots this year, but if there's one guy that can fill in that Tank Dell role, somebody who really has the athleticism to blow the top off of defenses and do some really big play type things for this Houston Texans offense, I'd have to say it's probably John Mechie. I think if you're looking for the safer play, Noah Brown going forward, but if you're looking for somebody who could really surprise you, like you said, an ascending asset, that's going to be Mechie.
And I think that's accurate. Let's go to Permar. Oh, first of all, Dom Guzzetti, longtime viewer of the show. He says he's been following you on X for a while, Dave. He loves the newsletters. Hey, who doesn't love the newsletters? Obviously, Football Guys is crushing it with that. We appreciate that. And Dave, like you're doing what, a weekly or a couple of weekly articles for Football Guys right now?
Yeah, I'm doing 2 articles a week, and then just kind of if I have any random ideas, Joe Bryan has been great about just kind of giving me the liberty to write whatever I want out there. But this year, I've peeled back on writing a little bit, just doing the 2 articles a week with some other ones in there. But it's been the Football Guys Fantasy Football show that Alfredo Brown and I are doing 5 days a week. So that's kept me pretty busy. You know it, Eric. A lot of people see this and think that we just hop on a show and BS for an hour or two. But the reality is there's a lot of work that goes into this, and a lot of prepping and making sure that your talking points are ready to go and that you know what you're talking about here. So, doing 5 shows a week has been quite a bit of work. So focusing a lot more of my energy on shows now than writing, but doing a little bit of both over there, Football Guys.
5 shows a week for Football Guys is a grind, and you guys do a great job, you and Alfredo, for sure. So keep up the great work. Not the last time, I'll tell you that tonight. Let's talk about Permar also saying, talking about Jalen Hyatt this week. He said if you've locked up a playoff spot already, he thinks Jalen Hyatt is a perfect start this week. He would start him over Jordan Addison. Now, the pushback I would give on the Jalen Hyatt thing, if you look at the Green Bay Packers defense and the way that they have sort of tried to deploy their 11 guys out there, it is a total too high safety look. A lot of let's keep everything in front of us. We don't want to give up the big play. Jalen Hyatt, to me, like his bread and butter is the big play. So for him to get behind the defense, not only a corner, but a safety as well, I don't know how often that is going to come on Monday night. Could happen, and he's been coming on for sure. But at the same time, I remain a little bit bearish on Jalen Hyatt. But Permar does bring up the point. What about Jordan Addison this week with the impending return of Justin Jefferson?
And that's a concern. I don't know if Josh Dobbs, he struggled to support a single wide receiver one. I mean, Hollywood Brown had some spike weeks. Jordan Addison looked good in small takes, but I don't know if he's going to be able to support 2 fantasy relevant wide receivers here. But I'm wondering, was there a little humor that we missed there where he says if you locked up a playoff spot, Hyatt's the perfect start? I mean, if you locked up a playoff start, what does it matter? You don't have to start anybody.
Yes, yeah. The aspect of like just trotting somebody out there for the heck of it, like I'm still trying to submit my best lineup, like regardless if I locked up a playoff spot or not. And listen, Hyatt could blow up this week, and I could be wrong on this, but the point I'm trying to make here is when you look at Hyatt v. Addison or Hyatt v. Washington, I think Washington represents a very intriguing start this week. I'm not seeing the intrigue with Hyatt. I think Addison's upside is obviously neutered a little bit with Jefferson coming back. We'll see what happens there. We'll get into the tonight's game in full force in about 10 minutes or so. But John Terry, a former champion in not only the Football Guys Players Championship, the FFPC main event, guy who's won a ton of money in the high stakes industry. He wants to know, Dave, are we willing to start anyone tonight, or is it a complete avoid? I don't know about you, Dave, but when I looked at my lineups for all my leagues, I play in about 24 leagues that are managed, and I looked at it was like the quickest starting lineup submission I've ever had all season long with the Steelers and Patriots tonight. Demario Douglas is out, so he was an easy sit. The tough choices, quite frankly, I had were Deontay Johnson and Jaylen Warren. I don't have any Ezekiel Elliott, so that was an easy choice. I don't really view anybody on the Patriots as a start. I'm auto starting sort of if I got the Pittsburgh defense anywhere, I'm deploying them. But to me, it's Deontay Johnson. I had to make a couple of Pat Freiermuth decisions, but those were a little bit easier. But Johnson and Warren were the toughest ones for me. And I want to get your thoughts on Najee Harris too. Like for me, I don't want to have anything to do with him tonight.
Yeah. I mean, I've got Jaylen Warren slightly ahead of Najee in my rankings, and Jaylen Warren, he's not a guy that I'm like super fired up about plugging into my lineups, but he's my RB24. So, I mean, right now, Jaylen Warren, Najee Harris, and Ezekiel Elliott are all between RB24 and RB28 for me, which doesn't instill a lot of confidence. But if you're in a league where you're thin at running back, dealing with some injuries, you need somebody to plug in as, obviously you're not playing them in your flex spot on a Thursday night, but that type of play, it's kind of where they slot in for me. I'm not seeing the appeal with Ezekiel Elliott. I hear a lot of people getting really excited about Ezekiel Elliott tonight, and they're saying, oh, the opportunity is going to be there. Somebody else is going to have to run the ball. I don't know if you saw JaMychal Hasty was just declared out, so it is just him and Ty Montgomery. But what I kind of see here is that we're going to see those really specialized roles for each running back, where Ezekiel Elliott's going to get the early down work, Ty Montgomery is going to get the passing down work. And is that really what you want, is to start an aging running back who hasn't looked good this year, who is going up against a tough defense on a Thursday night? I'm really expecting, one of those games where Ezekiel Elliott's going to get 16 carries for 40 scoreless yards, and that's not what you want in fantasy football. So I'm kind of a little bit lower on all these guys. I do have Jaylen Warren, the highest of the bunch. And then, like you said, Deontay Johnson, I like him as well. George Pickens scares me. I'll just be blunt. As much as we saw last year, it's kind of tough to decide whether that was just the fact that George Pickens was playing early in his rookie season, or is it a case of he and Mitch Trubisky not having the same chemistry? Because we saw when Mitch Trubisky was out there, he was hyper-targeting Deontay Johnson and not even looking George Pickens' way. Right. And then as soon as Kenny Pickett came in and became the starter, then George Pickens started seeing the looks. And then to start this year, George Pickens looked like the wide receiver one again, albeit, Deontay Johnson was injured. But I think we've seen enough that Mitch Trubisky, even when he came in last week, he seems to prefer Deontay Johnson. So I think you hit the nail on the head. Jaylen Warren starting him, Deontay Johnson starting him. If you're in a league where people are hoarding tight ends and you're looking outside of the top 12, Pat Freiermuth is a decent start as well. But this is typically a game that I'm trying to avoid if I can.
I'm with you. I mean, like, it's the NFL. We're going to watch it. Like, it's just what we do. But at the same time, we don't have to be super excited for the game as well. Let's get into Dom Gazzetti's question here, running back question. Jaylen Warren, his other choice here is Keaton Mitchell this week, Dave. Keaton Mitchell is at home against the Rams. Jaylen Warren, obviously, tonight home against the Patriots. The thing is, okay, I'm coming at this, and we'll talk about this in the next segment. I'm coming at this thinking that Harris did not practice all week. I don't know how big of a factor he's going to be. I don't trust him, which means I trust Jaylen Warren tonight. And I look at the Ravens running back situation. You got Gus Edwards on goal line. You got Justice Hill gumming up the works. And then you got Keaton Mitchell, who might be the most talented of the players there. But at the same time, if the Ravens are not giving him everything, then why should I trust him with everything? I'm not. I'm going to play Warren over Mitchell this week. What would you do?
Can I totally cop out here and say it kind of depends what you're looking for? If you're looking for the guy that's going to give you 8 to 12 points, you're probably going to get that from Jaylen Warren. If you're looking for the guy that has a sky-high ceiling, obviously it's Keaton Mitchell. Once you start getting that far down the rankings, looking at the RB30s and the RB36s, I don't think there's a guy in that section of your rankings this week that is going to have more upside than Keaton Mitchell. I really like the guy. I liked him in the preseason. We were talking about him a lot. On our show, I've been telling everybody on my show to pick him up since week 7, week 8, trying to get ahead of him before he was even activated off of IR. And what we have seen is his snap share growing every single week. Last week, I'm sorry, he led the backfield in touches. He had more carries than everybody else. He had more targets than anybody else, and he's given us consistent double-digit outings on just what I think like 11 touches per game, and he's still scoring. So with rookies, I don't want to drive too deep into the narrative here, but a lot of times we see the usage change dramatically out of the bye, and the Ravens are coming off of their bye week. We started to see the smoke there a little bit where Keaton Mitchell's role was growing. I think this is the one thing that they're really missing in Baltimore. They've got two running backs that are decent at what they do in Gus Edwards and Justice Hill, but Keaton Mitchell gives such a new layer to that offense, the big playability, the ability to score from anywhere on the field. I was comping him to Devin Achane in the offseason, two very small guys with game-breaking speed. And when you watch him now in the NFL, it looks like they are very similar players. So, I'd be okay starting Keaton Mitchell if you need to swing for the fences here. If you're looking for, like I said, more of a safer play, that's going to be Jaylen Warren. But Keaton Mitchell, don't be surprised if he goes out and gives you 20, 25 points this week.
I was listening to Abibag Betova, who is the back-to-back champion, the Football Guys Players Championship, won $750,000 in that. And he was comparing about Keaton Mitchell and Devon Achane, and he was comparing the talent, and the situation played a part of it. And he's like, I don't necessarily know if I see a huge difference between Mitchell and Achane. People think Achane, I got to start him, no question. Like, I got to get him in there based on what he's done. Well, there's something to be said for Mitchell as well. And I think you hit the nail on the head there, too, that Mitchell, league winner, gets tossed around quite a bit. But Mitchell could be the type of guy where all of a sudden he goes for 10, 11 carries for, 110 yards and 2 touchdowns. Non-zero chance of that happening as well. Plenty more starts and sits. Let's go to Al Paul here. In the chat. He's got, let's assume, tight end premium scoring for this. David Njoku, Cole Kmet, or Isaiah Likely are his choices this week. Likely at home against the Rams, Njoku at home against the Jaguars, and Kmet also at home against the Lions. Dave, if you can only pick one of these guys, I lean towards Likely, but I could be persuaded. Your thoughts?
Oh, man. I mean, splitting hairs here. This is my tight end 9, tight end 10, and tight end 11. So I have all these guys almost back to back with each other, with Gerald Everett slipping in there just ahead of Cole Kmet. But yeah, I lean ever so slightly Isaiah Likely as well. Rams have been pretty susceptible to tight ends this year. So we actually talked about him on our starts of the week show earlier today, Alfredo Brown and I had Gerald Everett as my start of the week, and he had Isaiah Likely as his start of the week. So I'm going to lean Likely here, but man, like I said, it's tight. I've got all these guys essentially back to back in the same tier.
Rob Phillips in the YouTube chat, he has to decide between Jaylen Warren or Breece Hall, who, again, another player who has not yet practiced this week. He's leaning Warren tonight. What would you do? And Dave, I got to be honest with you. Like, at this point, I want to get points on my team. Breece Hall is looking about as unlikely as possible. And even if he plays, I'm not necessarily seeing a massive upside here. Not saying that I see a massive upside with Jaylen Warren tonight, but I do see the possibility of points. I don't want to take a 0. I think the play is to play Warren over Breece Hall right now.
That's tough. I mean, Breece Hall said his expectation is to play this week, even without logging practices. And I mean, if there's anything we've learned about Breece Hall this year, it's that the guy is Wolverine, comes back from an ACL and rips off a 70-yard play in his first game back from an ACL. So I wouldn't be too concerned with the injury here, but I get what you're saying, because if you don't start Warren today, I don't know who the other option is that you can pivot to, and leaving, 8, 12 points on your bench from Jaylen Warren and then not getting Breece unexpectedly on Sunday. I don't know who the pivot option is. So I think, again, kind of copping out here a little bit, but I need a little bit more information to see, if you've got a guy like maybe Keaton Mitchell, who we just mentioned, or maybe if you've got, Ty Chandler or an AJ Dillon, somebody else that you can pivot to on Sunday, I might be inclined to wait it out. But if you don't have another option to pivot off of Breece, I think I'd just go with Jaylen Warren tonight to be safe.
I think that's the way that you do it. And like we said, Rob, if you do have another option, we'd love to hear it. But if there's literally the only two, take the points with Warren tonight. Our venerable producer, who I forgot to give a shout out to at the top of the episode, Tyler Soto, the man behind the glass, making the show go tonight. He does have a question. He's got CJ Stroud and Josh Dobbs as his quarterback. His opponent has Justin Jefferson, and he does need to win in order to get in the playoffs. there is 90% chance of rain in the forecast for the
Mhm.
Jets-Texans game this weekend. So he's iffy on starting Stroud. I am too. I understand the aspect of trying to get a win, and I don't want to say like, oh, you're going to play Dobbs simply for that. But I think you play Dobbs this week because rain aside, that's a tough matchup going against that Jets defense. So I think Dobbs is the play here.
Yeah, it's a tough matchup in the same way that Houston was a tough quarterback matchup last year. It's not necessarily that they have like a great defense, but teams are able to run against the Jets so much that quarterbacks just don't really have to do all that much. I was looking at the numbers today on a per game basis. Teams are running against the Jets more than any other team and passing against the Jets at a lower rate than any other team. So that's kind of the issue here, is that there just isn't a lot of volume to go around for the quarterbacks. Like you said, it's going to rain as well, most likely. Weather forecasts this far out can be a little bit iffy, but
Right.
if it's raining in New York, they're going to end up running a lot. Devin Singletary's look great. Damian Pierce has even looked good the last couple of weeks. So I understand what you're getting at. The Vegas defense hasn't been good for the last couple of weeks. Joshua Dobbs has that rushing upside. I think if we weren't looking at that dud from Joshua Dobbs last week, this would be a no-brainer. But I'm a little bit scared. We saw Josh Dobbs string together 3 straight 20-point performances. It looked like we stumbled into a QB1, and then he just gets absolutely smacked down by the Bears last week and doesn't look like himself. So I think we're maybe a little bit overcautious now because the Josh Dobbs magic is over. But again, I've got these guys in the same tier. I favor CJ Stroud ever so slightly, but going up against Justin Jefferson, I think that's kind of the deciding factor here, that you're kind of taken a little bit from Justin Jefferson. Everything he's catching through the air, at least you're getting the points for it with Dobbs.
I want to get back to Rob Phillips' question here. Jalen Warren, Breece Hall, his fallback, if he wants to wait on Hall, he'd be playing Tyjae Spears on Monday Night Football in a game where we think Derrick Henry's going to play, but we don't know. That's the other monkey wrench that goes into this, Dave.
Yeah, which all indications are that Derrick Henry is going to play. Didn't hit concussion protocol, and that's kind of the thing. Like, if it was a hamstring or an ankle, maybe we'd worry about some limitations that Spears. But it looks like Henry's probably going to be a full go. So if that is the pivot option, Tyjae Spears, I think I'd go with Jalen Warren tonight.
I'm with you. I think Warren is the play. Gerald Everett or Kyle Pitts this week from Permar 99. Let's assume tight end premium scoring again here. Kyle Pitts at home against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Gerald Everett at home against the Denver Broncos. I kind of lean towards Pitts here, but my God, with Arthur Smith, anything is possible, Dave.
Yeah, you guys are killing me with these tight end questions. Like, I got all these guys back to back. Like, I don't really have strong stances on any of these guys. But like I said, Gerald Everett was my start of the week. I've got him exactly 2 spots ahead of Kyle Pitts. So again, the biggest show of faith here. But Denver has given up the most points, the most yards, and the 3rd most receptions to fantasy tight ends this year. And I know a lot of people are going to say, yeah, well, their defense got better. Not really against tight ends. Over the last 4 weeks, they're giving up even more points to tight ends than they were to start the season. And really what it comes down to, I think that they are just desperate in Los Angeles for somebody to step up beside Keenan Allen. And maybe it's Alex Erickson. Maybe it's Stone Smart. Maybe it's Jalen Guyton or Darius Davis or all these other names that are getting thrown around. But at the end of the day, Gerald Everett's the veteran. He's been there for a few years. He's got 9 targets over the last 2 weeks, back-to-back 40-yard games. We've seen him score a handful of touchdowns this year. I think I'd lean towards Gerald Everett just because of the matchup with Denver. Again, this is a tough one, though, because you don't want to bench Kyle Pitts. We've seen him have a handful of games where he looks like the Kyle Pitts we drafted him to be. But like you said, Arthur Smith and his shenanigans, it could be a 2-target, 0-catch game.
Fantasy football team name for next year is definitely going to be Arthur Smith's shenanigans. It's just too pure. One other question for Permar 99, playoff defense. Let's figure this out. Who are you playing this week in the playoffs or to get to the playoffs? Is it the Cleveland Browns this week, Dave, who are at home against the Jaguars, or is it the Green Bay Packers on Monday Night Football who are going to be going up against the New York Giants?
I think it depends whether Trevor Lawrence is going to play or not. If Trevor Lawrence isn't playing and you're getting Cleveland going up against CJ Beathard, I'm going with that. Actually, you know what? Either way, I'm going to go with Cleveland. Cleveland's been a better defense. Looking right now, I've got Cleveland significantly ahead of the Green Bay Packers. Actually, not by much. It's a tough one. Yeah, I'm going with Cleveland, though. I'm going with Cleveland.
I'll say this about Cleveland, and this is coming from, I don't know exactly what we're looking at here as far as turnovers go, but I know Green Bay just does not turn the ball over a ton as far as their defense goes. And I think that's sort of what you're looking for is playmaking opportunities. They've gotten a few, turnovers over the course of, the last several weeks, but not a ton. So that's why I would agree with you and go with Cleveland here over the Green Bay Packers defense to try and get to your playoffs or advance in your playoffs as well. He's Dave Kluge from footballguys.com. You follow him on the X at Dave Kluge. I'm Eric Balkman from the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, and the FFPC. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to get into the BettorCast tonight. It is the Patriots. It's the Steelers. Dave's going to help me set my over-under picks and who's winning this game and what you need to know from a fantasy perspective. It's the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show exclusively on the Better Sports Network. Don't go anywhere. We got more coming up next.
Of the NHL games, I had a conversation with Coop A Fiasco yesterday when we were producing High Stakes, and he was talking about playing video games. And I, since he covers fantasy football, I said, "Hey, are you going to be getting the new Madden this year?" And he goes, "Yeah, I don't really play Madden. I play NHL." And that tells you, and it really does, that I do feel that the NHL game is better than Madden. I feel like Madden is overrated. The NHL game is so realistic. I don't know if you guys saw the trailer and all the new additions that they added to this game, but it really looks good. I tried finding all the games that I had of NHL, and I thought I had a lot. I only have 4 of them. And that's because I used to live with my my roommate and good friend who, got me into hockey, and we would play most of it in his house. So he has most of the games, but I do got 21.
There you go.
I got NHL 18. We got Connor McDavid up there. NHL 12, I think, was the start of the, new consoles for me. But the big one, the holy grail of NHL games, NHL 94 for the Sega Genesis right there. Look at that. Look at that beautiful cover. Look at it. Looks like a VHS tape. That's how good this game was.
Now let me stop you right there. So people, VHS tape, if you don't know, it's this like rectangular black plastic with the magnetic tape on the inside. Tape's this big. You put it in something called a VCR. For a little while, there was something called Beta that didn't last too long.
Look at this cartridge. I mean, they're not cartridges anymore. They're either discs or those little memory cards. But man, that thing is thick, right? And
you don't even need a cartridge or a disc anymore. You can buy the digital version. And then
you got Ron Barr on the book. I mean, he used to be always in the intro telling you about the team and what was going to be happening in the game. So NHL 94 is by far my favorite game, sports game. I love that game.
The High Stakes Fantasy Football Show rolls on here, 22 minutes until the top of the hour here exclusively on the Better Sports Network. I am Eric Balkman from the FFPC, the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, and the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown. Coming at you tonight with Football Guys royalty, Dave Kluge at Dave Kluge on the X machine. That's where you follow him. I want to remind everybody of a couple of things. One, I forgot to at the top of the show. Go to myffpc.com, play in the FFPC Weekly Challenge. No draft or salary cap. Choose the 10 or 12 players if you want to play with kickers and defenses, get those in by Sunday's kickoff at 1 p.m. Just watch them ride throughout the weekend's games. Only one player per NFL team. $35 and $200 to enter, win up to $2,500 there at myffpc.com. Now, the next thing I want to get into tonight is the thing we're going to be talking about here is the BettorCast. We are gamifying Thursday Night Football tonight on the BettorCast app. In fact, it's going to turn into the BenderCast with Fantasy Alarms, Howard Bender hanging out, leading everything, all the broadcast coverage that you need to have for the Steelers and Patriots tonight. You can check out Moose and Keith's game preview of the Patriots and Steelers, including their top picks and plays. Right now, you can compete in our free contest by answering pregame questions, which is live in the BettorCast app at this moment. During the game tonight, you can predict what's going to happen, test your NFL knowledge with some of the trivia questions, chat with our fans in there about the big plays, the top performers, and the fantasy football bus in real time. You don't have to buy anything. You don't have to subscribe to everything. It's always free to play. Watch Thursday Night Football with us, play our free contest, and win tickets. Now, the more questions you answer, the more tickets you will win, and the more tickets you get, you can redeem for authentic NFL signed gear and collectibles. Download the free BettorCast app in the App Store and Google Play right now. You just have to be 18 years or older. That's the BettorCast app in the App Store and Google Play. So what we're going to do right now, Dave, I'm going to bring up the BettorCast here, and you are going to help me with some of these picks tonight that I have, and hopefully we'll end up at the top of the leaderboard. We've done so a few times in previous shows. Somebody always seems to beat us. Well, hopefully this is our breakthrough night with such a weird Thursday night football game. Speaking of weird, Bailey Zappi. Let's talk about him.
Mm-hmm.
The over-under for passing yards for Bailey Zappi tonight in the BettorCast is set at 154.5, which you say, oh my God, Balky, that's incredibly low. Let me take the over here. Then you got to consider who they're playing, who he's throwing to, and the over-under of this game, which we'll get into in a little bit. Quite frankly, the way you teased it at the top of the show, I don't know which way you're leaning on this. Would you go over or under 154.5 for Mr. Zappi tonight?
I'm going over. And then, it doesn't feel good. It's a low number, and I understand wanting to take the under here, but he eclipsed that number in 2 or 3 games last year when he was getting a full workload. And even if with this tough matchup on the road, I think he can hit that. I mean, I don't think that Bailey Zappi is any better or worse than Mac Jones, and Mac Jones was averaging, almost 200 yards per game this season. So I get it. Tough matchup, all that, but I am taking the over here.
All right, let's go to the running back position. You kind of talked about this already, Dave. 59.5 rushing yards for Ezekiel Elliott. You don't view a big game for Elliott tonight. Does that mean you're going under?
I am going under. And 17 carries last week. Could see a similar workload this week, but I think things are a little bit different. When a player goes down mid-game, you're kind of scrambling, just whoever you got active and whoever had a full week of practice, that's a guy going in. I think we see a little bit more of Ty Montgomery tonight. So I'm taking the under here. At his current efficiency, we needed him to get to about 16, 17 carries to hit the over, which is certainly possible. I got to be honest, this was a tough one for me. I think that's a pretty good line, 59.5. I think he finishes right around there. So it's close for me, but I'm leaning towards the under for Zeke.
You're leaning towards the under for Zeke. What about from a season long standpoint? Is Ty Montgomery, let's say you're playing in the FFPC 12-team, 20-man roster. Does Ty Montgomery, is he a pickup for you at all?
Yeah. The game kicks off in a half hour, so pick him up right now and keep him stashed. I mean, I'm not advocating to put him in your lineup by any means.
But he's roster. He's a guy you want on your roster.
Yeah, Stevenson is likely out for the rest of the fantasy playoffs. I mean, and again, that's me speculating. He might be able to come back week 16 or week 17, but sounds like he's going to be out for a while. And if Ty Montgomery does get that coveted passing down role in this offense and a team that's going to be trailing a lot over the next few weeks, that could end up being pretty valuable. So absolutely worth a stash. Just don't trust him anywhere in a starting lineup yet.
That's the thing. It's just like, it's one thing to have him on your roster, but to have the stones to start him in your playoffs or like the championship round of any national contest you might be in, like the FFPC main event, Fantasy Pros Championship, whatever it is, like that's tough, isn't it, Dave?
I mean, right now, yeah, it sure is. But let's say by some fluke that we watched tonight's game, and like we said, we have these really specialized roles, and Zeke is the early down grinder, and Ty Montgomery comes out and sees 8 targets today. Next week against the Chiefs, in a game that they're projected to be trailing behind, you'd probably feel okay starting Ty Montgomery in that matchup, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, worth the stash.
Worth a stash for sure. And that's something that I would advocate anybody to do who is watching this right now, especially if you're playing in deep leagues. Okay. Historically low total tonight, 30.5. We've talked about it before. So it's weird for me to see these numbers on the BettorCast, but I have to put it in my mind that the Vegas and the BettorCast is only seeing 30.5 points scored tonight. Juju Smith-Schuster, receiving yards in a game that it will not have Demario Douglas, who is out with the concussion issues. And God, I hope he gets healthy soon for his own sake, number one. Number two, for fantasy, because he is so electric and he's so much fun to watch, and he's a difference maker out there. But Juju Smith-Schuster, 26.5 receiving yards, Dave. What are we doing with this here? Are we going over that because it's such a low number, or are we going under because there's just not a lot to like tonight?
I'm still taking the under, even with that really low line there. And I almost
even with taking the over at Bailey Zappi for 154.5, you're still going under Juju Smith-Schuster.
Yeah, because there are 2 other guys that I think kind of suck up all the targets there, and Juju Smith-Schuster isn't one of them. And I could be totally off base here, but Juju Smith-Schuster hasn't been good this year. I think maybe we're getting that steamed up a little bit because of the revenge narrative, going back to Pittsburgh, but Juju has only hit over 26.5 games 3 times out of 11 games this year. I mean, he's just been terrible.
What happened
again,
to him?
I don't know if it was injuries. I don't know. I don't know if they're
Yeah.
just getting in his head there. I mean, we got the reports in the preseason that they saw him as the 5th best receiver on the team. And I think a lot of people just blew it off and said, "Are you kidding? You saw what Juju Smith-Schuster did year 2 in the league. This guy's going to be great." And then last year before the injuries, he looked good as well. And then we got the Albert Breer report in the preseason. Remember where they said his knee could explode at any moment? I mean, it has just been a lot of bad news and a lot of bad juju, no pun intended, surrounding him this year. But on top of that, he hasn't been the big play guy. He has really been catching his balls at the line of scrimmage, not really doing too much, not getting downfield. So he's averaging less than 7 yards per reception. So at this line, you're hoping that he can catch 4+ passes tonight or rip off a big play, which he hasn't done either of those things this year. So, yeah, I'm taking the under, even with a soft line here. I'm just not buying into Juju.
Are you buying into his real-life teammate here, Devontae Parker, as we look at what he's set at tonight, 36.5 receiving yards. So he's only 10 more than Juju Smith-Schuster. Dave Kluge, is Parker one of those guys that you think is going to be soaking up the zappy targets tonight?
He is, yeah. And Devontae Parker is a guy that I'm easily taking the over here. I mean, if the over was at, if the line was set at 45 or 50, I'd probably still be leaning the over here. He's only hit that number 3 out of 7 times this year when he's been healthy, but saw a season high 9 targets last week with Bailey Zappi. If you go back and watch that game, Devontae Parker was the guy that Zappi was looking at often. So saw healthy target volume last week with Zappi. I think he sees it again. And really, when you start breaking it down and looking at who's available and who's on this Patriots team, I think Pop Douglas is the clear wide receiver 1, but I think Devontae Parker is easily the next most talented guy on this roster. And so far this season, it's been the concussions and the injuries that have kept him out of gameplay, but I think he's going to be the clear wide receiver 1 in tonight's game.
What about Pat Freiermuth? So, you look at what his total set at tonight, and it's at 26.5 receiving yards. Pat Freiermuth has hit that total 3 times this season, including last week against the Cardinals. He hit 29, so he barely scraped over it. Then he had another game where he had 41 yards. That was week 3. This dude missed, what was it, 5 games in the middle of the season where he didn't play at all. And then you look at his receiving totals. These are receiving totals. This is yardage, not targets, not catches. 3, 2, 7, 7. Last week I said 29. He had the random 3 for 41 in week 3. And I think the outlier here that gives us pause, or at least gives me pause on saying the under at 26.5. In week 12 at the Bengals, 9 catches for 120 yards. I don't know what made that game so different. If you can shed any light on that, that'd be fantastic, because I have no light to shed on that. But
that was the screw back Canada game. That's what that one was, if you remember.
That's right. Yeah. Okay. So now we got our reasoning on that one. So 120 for Freiermuth, then 29 last week.
So he's hit that over in both games without Canada.
Well,
and
so
that's what I'm leaning towards.
Over? Okay. All right. We can
That's
go
what I'm leaning towards. So I got the over for Freiermuth here. He saw 11 targets 2 weeks ago, saw 5 targets last week, and that's better usage than we have seen earlier in the season when Matt Canada was there. So try not to overreact to it too much, but it seems like this team had some juice injected into the offense after the firing of Matt Canada. So I'm taking the over at 26.5 on Freiermuth.
I want you to go over something that you talked about earlier when we were talking about Deontay Johnson tonight. And you brought up George Pickens' name and how his targets and his usage have changed with not only Matt Canada, but with the quarterback situation with Pickett versus Trubisky here. George Pickens has his total set tonight at 38.5 receiving yards. Tell us why you are going above or below that.
So I'm taking the over, even after talking about how Mitch Trubisky favors Deontay Johnson, everything I said earlier, I believe, but this is George Pickens, and that is a low line. I mean, this guy is averaging 62 yards per game this season. At 38.5, I mean, he only needs 2 catches to hit that. With the way that he can make plays after the catch, with the way he gets open downfield, I don't think he's going to see a huge target volume. He might only see 4 or 5 targets tonight. I don't feel great about this one. I don't want to pick this one, if I'm being honest, but for the sake of entertainment and the sake of this show and for the sake of the BettorCast, we have to make a choice here. And I'm going to take the over just because it's George Pickens and he can eclipse this in two catches.
I think that's the thing that, we were doing this show. I always bring this up because now it's legend. There was a Bears-Commanders game on Thursday Night Football.
Thursday night, yep.
Yeah, Thursday night, yeah. And I don't remember it.
DJ Moore.
That was the DJ Moore game.
Yards and 3 touchdowns.
Right, exactly. So we had my guest co-host that night was Mike Shope from WGR 550 in Buffalo and the Deep End Fantasy Football podcast. And he and I were hemming and hawing over this. And we went under on DJ Moore. We didn't feel it that night. And like, I'm not kidding you, like 6 minutes into after the game started into our broadcast, I said, Mike, he just caught his first pass of the game and he's already over. And then he went on to just absolutely destroy the Commanders. But that's the thing with Pickens too, is he has this big play capability. And when you have big play capability, you take the over. It doesn't seem all that daunting to hit that when you know this guy could light up the field at any given moment. So I'm with you on Pickens there. Let's go to his teammate, Jaylen Warren here. Jaylen Warren, more or less than 56.5 rushing yards tonight. I've been pretty clear tonight that I think Warren dominates the backfield touches. I think if 56.5 is an interesting number, I still lean over that number here tonight, even with Harris active. But I want to get your thoughts on this, Dave.
Yeah, I'm with you as well. I'm going over. We saw his workload kind of ramp up 5 weeks ago. And since that, he has hit over 56.5 in 4 of those 5 weeks. I mean, he's another guy, just like the big play upside here. He can score a 56-yard touchdown at any point in the game. Like, he's got that juice where he can score from anywhere on the field. So I think even if he is splitting carries, if Najee Harris is a little bit more involved than we expect, I still think that's a pretty attainable number. Even if he's only getting, 9, 10, 11 carries this game, he could still easily eclipse that because he just has that ability to score from anywhere. So yeah, I'm taking the over here.
You're taking the over, as am I. Now, let's get into brass tacks here. We took the over on Freiermuth. We took the over on Pickens. Now we get to Mitchell Trubisky. God, what a matchup tonight. Zappy versus Trubisky. This is going to be fantastic. 180.5 passing yards is what he's set at right now. So we already talked about Pickens and Freiermuth. Deontay Johnson obviously still on this team. And Jaylen Warren is going to be catching passes out of the backfield as well. Over or under, Dave Kluge, Mitch Trubisky tonight on passing yards, 180.5.
I think you know where I'm going with this one. I've been leaning over with the other pass catchers here. I'm leaning over with Mitch Trubisky as well. He hit that number over 185 or 180.5, 3 of 5 games last year as the starter. Last week we saw him play half the game and he threw for 117. I think all of the lines, I understand why people are scared. It's a gross matchup on a Friday, but I think all the lines are just a little bit too low tonight. So I'm not typically a guy that hammers the overs. I know overs are fun and they make for a fun sweat and, it makes for fun watching the game, but I really lean towards the over on a lot of these. The only guys that I was under on were Zeke and Juju. I'm expecting this to be one of those games where everyone goes in with such low expectations that it ends up being a little bit better than we expected.
It could be. It very well could be. I just hope for a good game and for both teams to have fun, right? And we'll just enjoy it, going forward on that. Okay, you talked about this at the top of the show. Total is 30.5. I can't remember how far back we have to go for a total this low, but 30.5 is the total tonight. You like the over. Tell us why you like. Is this just simply a misset line? This is too low. Obviously, they're going to score more than 30.5 points, or is there something more to a method to your madness here, or maybe not madness, Dave?
There's a little bit of a method. I went back and I looked, and there have only been 12 games in NFL history that have been below 30.5, and 67% of those hit the over. Once you expand it up to 30.5, you get a few more games in there, but still hitting over 60% on the over. And I think that's just what it is. When you set the over under this low, it does tend to go over more often than not. So yeah, I mean, this could be a 2-3 game or a 3-6 game. It could be everything that we expect and worse. Don't get me wrong, but history tells us that when an over-under is set this low, the games do tend to go over more often than not.
All right, so we're taking the over on this, and then the final question on the BettorCast right now: which team is going to win? Now, we're trying to get points. We're trying to get the most points possible on the BettorCast. Now, if we go with the Steelers and they win, we get 10 points. If we go with the Patriots and they win, we'll get 15 points. Is that enough of a carrot to take the Patriots tonight, Dave, or are you still going with the Steelers?
I'm still going with the Steelers. I've got the Patriots covering, but I am going with the Steelers here. My prediction for this game, if you want it, is Steelers 21, Patriots 17. So, I'm not sitting here selling it as a blowout. These teams aren't scoring 40 points each, but I think we just barely get over the line, and I think that the Patriots can cover, but I think the Steelers are just winning games, man. They just know how to do it, and I think they do it again tonight.
Tyler Soto, our producer, said that if this is a 3-2 game, if it is a 4-2 game, if it is a 5-4 game, something like that, he said this could be a scoregami tonight. We could have a Thursday night football scoregami, and who wouldn't be in for what else? You would tune in for that at that point. Nobody wants if it's here's the thing. If it's 3-3 late in the game or 6-3 late in the game, ain't nobody tuning in for that.
But if it's
2-2, score of 5-4, 2-2, 3-2, everybody's dialing up their Prime Video to check out the Steelers and the Patriots tonight. That's going to be a lot of fun. Let's get back into the YouTube chat right now. Rubio hanging out, watching us on YouTube. Football guys in the house. Who would you start this week? Fields or Stroud is his question. He's got a quarterback conundrum here. For me, we kind of talked about CJ Stroud a little bit already, and I love what Fields can do with his legs. You don't necessarily have to be a proficient NFL franchise quarterback. Not saying Fields isn't, but you don't have to be that in order to be a proficient fantasy football quarterback. Fields is that. I'm going to play Fields at home against the Lions over Stroud this week, Dave.
Easily. Last time Fields played the Lions at home, he put up over 40 points. Over his career against Detroit, he's averaging 26.2 points, and he's rushed for 100+ in 3 straight games against the Lions. I don't want to read too much into divisional matchups or whatever, but for whatever reason, Fields has just had their number throughout his career. He always shows up when he plays against Detroit. The Lions are giving up the 5th most rushing yards to quarterbacks of any team this year. They're giving up the 5th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. I guess the one thing I'm a little bit nervous about, the Bears defense has looked good the last couple of weeks. The Lions have a good defense as well. So there is the chance here that this ends up being kind of a slow, low scoring game. But it seems like every time these two teams meet over the last couple of years, when the Bears and Lions play each other, we end up having these big explosive shootouts, and Justin Fields ends up being the biggest beneficiary there. So I'm pretty high on Justin Fields this week. I've got him as my QB7 in my rankings, CJ Stroud QB12. So lean in Fields pretty comfortably in this matchup.
I totally agree, obviously, on that. I want to shift the focus back to defenses here for a second. My buddy John Laskowski is in the chat right now. He says he needs a huge performance from the Steelers defense tonight. And Dave, I probably have the Steelers defense going in, 5-6 leagues or something like that. So that'd be tremendous tonight. What are your thoughts? Because you are picking the over tonight. Are the Steelers a fool's gold defense start tonight? Should we be looking elsewhere? Or is this a team that you just want to deploy out there given who they're going up against and the fact that they're at home?
Yeah, I'm picking the over, but one of those touchdowns could easily be a fumble 6 or a pick 6. This game could be a little sloppy. I think you could still lean with the Steelers here. Like I said, I'm expecting it to lean towards the over, but this could still be a sloppy game. There could be turnovers. There could be a lot of sacks. I think TJ Watt is just going to be in Zappy's face all night. So I think that you're pretty safe trotting out the Steelers. Looking at my weekly rankings right now, Steelers are my number 1 defense. I mean, I got them ahead of the San Francisco 49ers against Seattle, ahead of the Dolphins against Tennessee. So there's no defense. I'm starting ahead of Pittsburgh this week.
That was going to be my next question. I have in 2 leagues I know of, maybe 3, but I know 2 for sure. I have Pittsburgh and Miami. I have Pittsburgh ahead of Miami. Or, of course, maybe if I have them in 2 leagues, maybe it benefits me to start Pittsburgh in one and Miami in the other. I think I'm going to do that. And it's perfect because we're coming up on a break right now. So I can do that. Here's what we're going to do. All the viewers, you are going to go to the App Store or Google Play, download that BettorCast app. Dave Kluge and I have our pregame questions answered on the BettorCast app. You can answer those questions right now and take your shot at winning a ton of tickets tonight so you can cash in on NFL memorabilia and collectibles. Make sure you're downloading that for free in the App Store and Google Play. When we come back, I'm going to quiz Dave on some of the players where he stands on them right now. Talking about Devin Singletary, talking about DeAndre Swift, Justin Herbert, Jordan Love, players like that. And we'll also get into some stuff that we haven't touched on yet. I do want to talk to him about Brevin Jordan. I do want to talk to him a little bit about Joshua Palmer. That's all coming up. We got another hour to go. Fantasy Football Night in America rolls on with the Better Sports Network's high-stakes fantasy football show. Dave Kluge, I'm Eric Balkman. We're back right after this.
The Bears have to be one of the most inept franchises of any sport I've ever seen in my entire life. And they share the city with the White Sox, who are also inept. Like, that is how bad the Bears are. I just don't understand how you can go your entire existence and the quarterback that wins you a Super Bowl is Jim McMahon. You couldn't find anybody else.
They don't have a good history with quarterbacks, and they let him be the quarterback for a long time, too.
Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes right there. Mm-hmm. And you drafted Mitch Trubisky. They were right there. I there's a lot of pain in being a Falcons fan. The Bears are one of the teams I could argue they might have it worse, and they have a Super Bowl. And when the best quarterback in the past 50 years is Jay Cutler, you have a problem.
That's so funny that you just said that. We were talking about Jay Cutler the other day, me and my friend, and I was like, yeah, he was on, because we were watching the Colorado Rockies game against the Giants, and it looked like he was behind the thing. I was, yeah, well, he played for Denver most of his career. We looked it up. Chicago let him be their starting quarterback way too long.
Here's the thing, too, is that Jay Cutler wasn't bad. Like, he was erratic. He wasn't terrible, though.
The poor man's Brett Favre.
I'm taking him over Justin Fields. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would.
But Jay Cutler led that team to an NFC title game that they lost to Green Bay. But he's gotten farther than anybody else. You want to know who the other starting quarterback was for the Bears in the other Super Bowl appearance they made? It was Rex Grossman. What are we doing out here? It was Rex Grossman, and Kyle Orton was the backup. How are you that bad? Bro, like, oh my God. Listen to the top 5. According to Football Reference, the top 5 greatest Bears quarterbacks of all time. Jay Cutler, number 1.
I can't believe it.
Sid Luckman, who last played in 1950, is number 2. Jim Harbaugh is number 3. Jim McMahon, the Super Bowl winner, is number 4, and he played there for 6 years. And Mitch Trubisky, is number 5 on the list as terms of passing yard go.
2 minutes past the top of the hour here on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. I am Eric Balkman from the FFPC, the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown. Follow me on the X at Eric Balkman. He is Dave Kluge at Dave Kluge on the X machine, and of course at FootballGuys, footballguys.com, at FootballGuys on the X. Interesting conversation we just got into here. So we saw the break with Tyler Soto talking about the Bears quarterbacks. Dave, you are in Colorado, correct?
I am born and raised in Chicago and a Bears fan at heart, but in Colorado. Yep.
And if you, by the way, anybody who's watching, if you go to x.com/Dave Kluge, you will find out that he not only is a member of Football Guys and does work for them there, but he is a noted Jay Cutler apologist. Why are you a Jay Cutler apologist? And let's talk about the signed Jay Cutler football helmet in the background right there that you just pointed to. Don't take it off the shelf. I don't want to destroy its
retail value. You don't want it on
my head. But no, well, you can put it on your head, but I feel like that's going to be tougher to sell unless you have Dave Kluge super fans out there that want a helmet, worn by you. Talk about Jay Cutler. Talk about what you just saw with the Bears, and then I want you to lead into what the Bears should do if they do end up getting the number 1 overall pick in the draft?
A lot of questions there and a lot to cover. Yeah.
I want you to, when I ask a lot of questions, I'm just asking you to go
just ramble about the Bears and my
exactly.
my lifetime of heartbreak and watching Rex Grossman lose a Super Bowl to Peyton Manning. Yeah, I mean, it's been nothing but pain, but I think Jay Cutler was a great quarterback. I really think he had the tools to be an all-time great. They set him up in Denver. He was behind a great offensive line. He had good weapons, and he threw for, I believe it was 4,700 yards his final year in Denver. And then they brought him into Chicago, put him behind a terrible offensive line where he took 52 sacks, I believe it was his first season. And his wide receiver 1 that year was a converted kick returner, Devin Hester's first year playing wide receiver. And they just said, all right, go out there and figure it out. And you're going to get hit by the defenses, and you got to throw the ball to a kick returner and, be the savior that we need him to be. And he immediately just started to revert back to all the tendencies we saw in Vanderbilt, rushing through his progressions, throwing off his back leg, trying to play hero ball. And then by the time they tried fixing things by bringing Brandon Marshall back to him and drafting Alshon Jeffrey and getting him good, solid weapons, by then it was too late. Damage was done. So I really think that Jay Cutler had the tools to be great. It was just his career was, just terrible what happened to him. Josh McDaniels gets brought in there and just berates him and then runs him out of town so he could draft Tim Tebow. It was just a series of terrible events that happened to Jay Cutler. But now we got Justin Fields, and you want to ask what I think we should do here. I've got one of the
hold on. I want to stop you just for a quick second before you get into Fields, because I think this is an interesting question. It's something I've always wondered about. So I'm in Northeast Wisconsin, Packers fan, obviously, and I think back to that NFC Championship game where B.J. Raji ended up picking off Caleb Haney to send the Packers to the Super Bowl in 2010, where they ultimately beat the Steelers. Cutler got hurt in that game, and from what I understand, it was a pretty serious knee injury. If Cutler doesn't get hurt that game, let's just live in the matrix here for a second. Let's say Cutler doesn't get hurt. Let's say the Bears win that game, and then they beat the Steelers in the Super Bowl. Do we have a much different view of Jay Cutler at that point than we do now?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, if he had a Super Bowl ring, we'd be looking at him as another Dan Marino type guy, like he was a gunslinger. Like he was really good.
Yes.
It's just every single year he had something going for him. Either he'd get hurt or his wide receiver 1 would get hurt. I mean, it was just terrible, terrible luck that followed him around during his time in Chicago. And like you said, that knee injury that he had in that NFC Championship game, you talk to 90% of Chicago fans, and they have this mindset that he was faking the injury. He just had this face, like just the jowls that were kind of droopy, and he just always
smoking Jay Cutler, baby.
And people hated him for it. And there he was, sitting on the exercise bike, riding, and it ended up, I believe he tore his meniscus. Like it was a serious injury at the time. But everybody just, he doesn't want to be out there. He doesn't have that warrior mentality. If Jim McMahon would have been out there, he would have finished the game. And it's just, the Chicago media is terrible. The fan base is terrible. I mean, Tyson Bagent, after his first start, the lead story in the Chicago Sun-Times, the biggest newspaper in Chicago, the lead story in the Chicago Sun-Times after Tyson Bagent started one game was that he should be the starter over Justin Fields. I mean, the media is terrible. The fan base is terrible. The stadium is terrible. I don't have a choice, right? I was born in Chicago. Dad was season ticket holder. I've been going to games since I was a little kid, but it is rough being a Bears fan, man.
Well, this is interesting because I remember when the Bears drafted Fields. Was it number 10 or 12 overall?
They traded up to get him at 10.
Right, 10, yeah. And I remember thinking, I'm like, and this is still when Rodgers was with Green Bay, I'm like, God bless it. The Bears have found their guy. This guy is going to be tough to deal with in the NFC North for the next decade. And it hasn't happened, hasn't materialized. And I don't necessarily blame Justin Fields for all or any of it, quite frankly. I think he's got a lot of talent. The what he was able to do to Ohio State, I think spoke volumes of what type of quarterback he could be in the NFL. Now the Bears are in the unique position because of their trade with Carolina last year that they could have the number 1 overall pick. Maybe not the number 1 overall. Maybe they get the number 2. Either way, they could get Caleb Williams. They could get Drake May. They could have their pick of any quarterback here. This is not fantasy. But Dave, as a Chicago Bears fan, if the Bears end up with the number 1 overall pick, what would you do with that pick? What would you do with Fields? If it was GM Dave Kluge instead of GM Ryan Poles, what would happen?
It's a tough question, and I feel like I change on like a daily basis on how I feel about this and what I want the Bears to do. Um, I've seen this song and dance so many times, like where we drafted the guy that we thought was going to be the guy. Right now, it's Justin Fields. Before that, it was Mitch Trubisky. Before that, we traded for Jay Cutler. Before that, Rex Grossman, first round pick. Before that, McNown, first round pick. Like it's always been somebody that we thought was going to be the guy. And the Bears, like I said, the fan base, the media. I mean, you could be a rookie quarterback playing in week 2, you throw an interception and the fans are booing at you and throwing their beers from the stadium. Like it's a tough environment to play in. And we just haven't had the infrastructure. Sigmund Bloom, you want to talk about a football guy's legend. He talks all the time about how teams have a DNA, that coaches can change and that ownership can change, but teams just have a DNA. And the DNA of the Bears has always been having like a strong middle linebacker and having a good run game and just not being able to figure out the quarterback situation. So I don't know what the best thing to do is. Right now, I kind of like the idea of just continuing to build around Justin Fields. And right now, we've got 1 year left on the rookie deal. Then we got the 5th-year option. Then we got the franchise tag. So you're looking at potentially Justin Fields over the next 3 years. You could basically get him at about $50 million. If you told me right now that we can get Justin Fields on a 3-year, $50 million contract, I think that's great. Then you trade back from 101 and you can end up with possibly 3 more first-round picks. So if you tell me we got a 3-year window with Justin Fields, we've got DJ Moore. We could still draft Marvin Harrison. We could have another 5 additional picks over the next 3 years and still have Justin Fields on a team-friendly deal. I think that's the best thing to do. But we have to remember that Ryan Poles, the current GM, didn't draft Justin Fields. He inherited Justin Fields. Matt Eberflus, the head coach, he wasn't there when Justin Fields was selected. He inherited Justin Fields as well. So I think both of these guys, as a chance to buy themselves a little bit more time as a head coach and as a GM, they're going to say, let's do it with our guy. They're going to draft Caleb Williams. They're going to get 1 year with Caleb Williams. It's going to be a losing season. Ryan Poles is going to get fired. Matt Eberflus is going to be fired. And it's going to be Justin Fields 2.0. Where he got drafted, his GM and his head coach were fired after his rookie season. He had to learn a new system. Jay Cutler had to learn 4 offensive systems in 8 years. It's just the same thing. It's just a constant churn. There's never any continuity. You look at the teams that are successful and they have continuity, be it with the general managers, the head coaches, the quarterbacks. They stick it through and they figure it out. The Bears are just constantly in this churn. I can't remember the last time we've had a GM, a head coach, and a starting quarterback stick together for more than a 3-year stretch. And I think that that's just going to continue to be the DNA of the Bears, unfortunately. So if I had it my way, Justin Fields, build around him, but I don't think it's going to happen.
So many things coming to mind here, and I don't know where to begin. So number one, I think part of the problem in the NFL, and this isn't a Bears problem, this is an NFL problem. If you don't draft a quarterback, or if you inherit a quarterback, you automatically get your career extended because you don't have your guy. So Poles and Eberflus could essentially extend their career. I think it's more like, I know what happened last time, but I think they get at least 2 years with Caleb Williams, right? Because it's their guy. They're trying to reset. So whatever. So at that point, then maybe we'll see. So that's my thought on that. I'll say this about the Packers. One of the things I've noticed over the years, and this truer than anything I've ever heard in pro sports, as far as a GM or a head coach goes, if you start siding with the fans, if you start doing what the fans want and what they say and what they think should be done, you'll soon find yourself sitting next to them. I can't remember who said that. Might have been Andrew Brandt, former capologist for the Packers. Might have been him who said it, but that's true. And the fact that the Packers don't have a Daniel Snyder, a Mark Davis, who owes probably $1 billion to past coaches that he has fired. Because the Packers don't have that, they're sort of just kind of relegated to staying the course, right? That franchise, it is the easiest franchise in the NFL just to stay the course, right? Because they don't have to answer to an owner. They don't have and think about the changes that could have happened on the Packers this year. This leads into your latest article for footballguys.com right now, 3 up, 3 down, week 14. Think about how many people were calling for Jordan Love's head after the Raiders game, after the Broncos game. So many national pundits saying he's not the guy. The Packers need to move on. They need to find somebody else. This guy is a backup at best. Now you look at what happened when they stayed the course, and probably most importantly, and this gets overlooked, probably most importantly, guys like, I know he's hurt now, but Luke Musgrave, Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, Romeo Dobbs. All these guys had so many drops earlier in the season.
Mm-hmm.
They're actually catching the passes right now. They're actually running the correct routes. God bless it. I hate that I turn each one of these shows into a Packers show, but I'm going to do it again tonight. The fact that he is doing all this right now, and he just beat the Lions on Thanksgiving. The Packers beat the Chiefs on Sunday Night Football. This is part of the reason that Jordan Love found himself in the 3-up section of your 3-up, 3-down column, which you can find at footballguys.com right now, Dave.
Well, I've written 14 editions of this so far this year, and Jordan Love has found himself in the 3-up section, in the 3-down section, and then back in the 3-up section. I mean, it's really been a tale of three
Which
seasons.
is accurate.
Yeah.
And it's totally accurate. Yeah.
And you look, I mean, to start the season, he was averaging 22.1 points per game in fantasy through week 4. You know, he was the QB3 in scoring. And then he went on a 5-game stretch in the middle of the season where he was scoring 13 points per game. Now he's scoring 22.5 points per game over the last 4. And, you know, fantasy points don't paint the full picture of what he has done.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was a lot of erratic play early in the season and made up for it with touchdowns. And it seemed like it wasn't going to last. But, you know, Jordan Love, he really has completely made me eat a plate of crow. You know, I like Jordan Love in the preseason, and then I sold high on him in a lot of leagues after
that's the thing, Dave. Dave, you're not alone on this. Like, you make it seem like you were not the only one. There was a ton of people out there. Myself, like the biggest Packers fan out there, I was kind of like, you know, I think he'll be okay, but who knows?
And I think, you know, again, we talk about like teams having a DNA, and the Packers, their DNA is trusting their scouting, trusting their draft process, and sticking it out. How many people, you know, as a Packers fan, you know, I was from Chicago. I've got family in Green Bay. The company I used to work for was based out of Green Bay, Wisconsin. So I know a ton of Packers fans, and people were calling for Devontae Adams' head after his second season in the year, saying this guy was a bust, you know, get him off the team, yada, yada, yada. Devontae Adams develops into maybe the best wide receiver of our generation. You know, there was a lot of people scoffing at how they managed Jordan Love. You know, you spent a 1st-round pick on this guy and you're going to let him sit on the bench for 3 years. Well, it seems now like that might have been a good decision. Even the 1-year contract that they gave him, you know, the kind of de facto 5th-year option, they gave him, 25 million this year on a 1-year deal. A lot of people were scoffing at that. The Packers just do things their way, and they always have the long-term view. They aren't trying to just you know, get by to next week. They aren't just trying to maintain what they can. I mean, they've had this big picture view. As long as I've been a fan of football, I've watched the Packers do things this way. They trust their process. They home grow their team, and it seems to work for them. Even if they haven't won a ton of Super Bowls, you know, they've still got 2 in the last 30 years, and they're always competing. They're always finding their way in the playoffs. Packers do things the right way. You know, right now, the Steelers, Patriots, I think 2 other teams that do things the right way. And this might not be the best year for the Patriots, but they stick it out long-term with the same coaches. They home grow their players. They aren't trying to fill seats. They're trying to make the team better long-term. And it works for some of these franchises.
We have the first play from scrimmage right now. I'm just seeing it right now on Amazon Prime. Tyler Soto, our man behind the glass, saying TJ Watt is being looked at. He is out of the game right now. He is standing up on the sideline. It looked like he took a knee to the face mask from Ezekiel Elliott on the first play from scrimmage. I think he'll come back in after this play. We shall see. 2nd and 10 for the Patriots as they begin their drive at the 25-yard line, their own 25-yard line. Zappy is going to hit. God, who is that? That's Elliott. And a nice little play, about a 13-yard gain there for the Patriots as they matriculate the way down the field. Enough about the Packers. Let's move on and talk about another player in your 3-up, 3-down column. And this is a player I feel like over the last couple of weeks, you could, as Sigmund Bloom would say, you can hear the drum beats on this guy with Chubba Hubbard.
Mm-hmm.
Chubba Hubbard is a player that has taken over that backfield right now. Tell us a little bit about why he is the guy that you want to play in Carolina as far as running back goes over Miles Sanders.
I mean, I think he's the only guy you want to play in Carolina, period. I don't want to start any wide receivers, tight ends.
Well, hold on. Yeah, what about Adam Thielen? You wouldn't play Thielen right now?
I mean, right now I've got Thielen as kind of a back-end wide receiver 3, so if you're desperate, you're playing him, but I mean, he has cooled off a ton. I think right now Chubba Hubbard is the guy to be excited about. Back-to-back games with 20-plus points, but even 2 weeks ago, if you looked, he was still splitting snaps, splitting touches, just happened to get it in the end zone and kind of save his day there. But first game without Frank Reich, first game without Deuce Staley, their running backs coach, of course, he out-touched Miles Sanders 25-8. And that's what we wanted to see. You know, it's kind of been this 50-50 split. We knew Chubba Hubbard was the better of the two. He was, besting Miles Sanders in just about every single efficiency metric. But Deuce Staley and Miles Sanders, they had this connection going back to their days in Philadelphia. Deuce Staley was the one that vied for Miles Sanders to get him this contract in Carolina. And with him out of the picture now, the new coaching staff is looking at Chubba Hubbard as their guy. So I've got Chubba Hubbard this week as my RB20, starting him pretty confidently.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that too. By the way, Juju Smith-Schuster just caught a 37-yard pass.
Oh my gosh!
Who would have thunk it, right?
And in the double coverage, it was 26.5, wasn't it?
Yeah,
oh my
yeah,
goodness.
exactly.
Well, all right.
Well, I mean, it is what it is. This is what happens as the Patriots are now inside the Steelers 30, moving down the field. They got a 3rd and 9 now from about the 29-yard line, 12:37 to go in that first quarter. Yeah, it was.
If I could say
an incredible pass.
If I could say one more thing about Chubba Hubbard too, Chubba Hubbard is one of those guys that his rookie season, I think a lot of people had really big expectations for, and he was terrible as a rookie. And I think a lot of people just haven't really been able to wash that stink off. Like when they hear Chubba Hubbard's name, they still think about how bad he was as a rookie. You watch him this year and you compare his tape this season to the player he was as a rookie, it's a night and day difference. He is such a better football player now. So I think that, I know this is kind of a redraft show. We're talking about fantasy playoffs and things like that, but Chubba Hubbard's a guy in dynasty leagues that I'm trying to go out and buy because I think that people are just still, thinking there's an ability to sell low on him. But when I watch Chubba Hubbard this year, he looks like a good running back, the guy that we hoped he'd be coming out of college.
Yeah, for sure. And this is the thing. We're always reevaluating. We're always resetting our expectations. And I think with Hubbard, if you do that properly, you can find some good value in him, not only in redraft, but dynasty going forward as well. A player that, well, he's on your down list. And quite frankly, a guy that we may have seen the best of as far as 2023 goes, Dave. Devin Singletary for the Houston Texans was unbelievable when Pierce was out. Pierce is back right now. And I don't know if we can make heads or tails out of this backfield. Can you let us know what you're thinking about Singletary and Pierce right now as far as their startability in redraft leagues?
Yeah, it's frustrating because I think Singletary, I don't think anybody would have thought this to start the year, but I think Singletary looks like the much better running back right now. I mean, he had back-to-back games with more rushing yards than Dameon Pierce has had in a single game all season, even when he was getting the heavy workload. But what we saw last week was that Singletary is not only in a 50-50 split, but he lost almost all of the red zone work to Dameon Pierce. So I think the only time that we're really looking at Singletary as a guy that you can count on in fantasy is when they are in a trailing game script. And just saw Zeke take that one in. Yeah, so much for Zeke not getting the passing down work. My goodness, he looks like a 24-year-old out there. But yeah, I mean, I think the only way you can really count on Devin Singletary now is in games where they're trailing. Like, we saw a couple weeks ago, they were down and he pulled 6 targets, but it's going to be tough to predict games where Houston's going to be trailing. I don't think we're going to see that all that often. So, yeah, Singletary, unfortunately, is trending down, a great spot start for those couple of weeks we got in, but I don't know if we can continue to see that going forward.
Ezekiel Elliott, as Dave Kluge just told you, an 11-yard touchdown catch from Bailey Zappi. The extra point for the Patriots is up and good. 7-0, 11-12 to go in the first quarter. Just the way we thought it was going to happen with Chad Ryland accentuating the touchdown from Ezekiel Elliott with an extra point. Unbelievable stuff. Dave, maybe your overpick is looking good right now with that Elliott touchdown. I mean, this could be a fun night.
I'll take the silver lining there, even though we already
lost
the juju under.
Let me tell you about the silver lining for Kyren Williams. So this is a player that I was not on board with, like pretty much all offseason. Did not see anything with him. Cam Akers was there. Kyren Williams never wowed me in college. His metrics were not, unbelievable or anything to the point where I'm thinking, oh, this guy is going to be a game changer in fantasy. So when I was doing my drafts in August, I was hitting up Kyren Williams late, 15th, 16th round, 17th round sometimes, just because he was that injury away type guy. Football Guys, Jordan McNamara says that all the time. Get these injury away type guys on your team. I never had high hopes for him. And yet this guy and I think Jordan McNamara said this too, he excelled as a pass blocker, never really demonstrated pass catching ability. He's an undersized guy. Somehow has become a 3-down bell cow for the Rams this season. Obviously, he missed all that time on IR in the middle part of the season, but then his first game off IR, he puts up the better part of 200 total yards and absolutely crushed it. What did we miss on with Kyren Williams, Dave? How can we be better in the future? I have him on a lot of my leagues, but it's not because I liked him. It was just because he was out there and again, he was one injury away from being significant. I still can't wrap my brain around how good he has been this season, though.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's really a takeaway from Kyren Williams and what he's doing. Like, yeah,
he's just an outlier, basically.
I think that's what it is. Like, what are we supposed to say? Like, oh yeah, draft the relatively unathletic, undersized 5th-round running back. Like, no, I mean, like everything was pointing against him. Like what he's doing right now is completely unheard of. And I'm with you. Didn't like him as a prospect all that much. You know, wasn't a guy that I was actively targeting. And then even in redraft this year, I wasn't buying into it. And, you know, when he had his breakout early in the season, I wasn't buying into it as well, because what I saw was a lot of passing down work and I saw a lot of touchdowns, and both those things can regress on a rushing basis. I really like the metric rushing yards over expectation per attempt. He was dead last in the league in 3 of his first 4 games. Like literally one of the least efficient runners in the NFL. And I said, there is no way that this is going to continue. You can't keep giving this sort of volume to an inefficient, like I said, relatively unathletic running back, but the volume stayed. And then as he got more touches, he seemed to get into a rhythm. And now he is looking like a much better running back. You know, I thought he was going to be a scat back. I thought he was going to catch some passes, going to be a James White type of guy at best. But now he is a true 3-down back. So I guess if there's any takeaway, we want to try to learn from this situation. It's just to draft any running back with a pulse that is under Sean McVay. Because we've seen Sean McVay do this with Malcolm Brown over like a 1-month period where he turned Malcolm Brown into an RB1. We saw him turn Darrell Henderson into an RB1 for half a season. Now, I think at this point, we can say that Kyren Williams is probably better than those guys. You know, he's looked great over the last few weeks, and I don't want to take that away from him. But despite his inefficiencies, he continued to get fed volume, and volume is kind of what means everything for running backs. And he took advantage of that opportunity. And now, you know, somebody who's fading Kyren Williams in the draft process, somebody who's fading him after his first few weeks this season, I don't know if there's anybody besides Christian McCaffrey that I'd prefer for the rest of the season.
Wow, that is a bold statement. But you know, it's accurate. I mean, the way that he and we don't talk about Coach of the Year on this show a whole lot, but when you think about what Sean McVay has been able to do with Kyren Williams, with Puka Nacua, Tyler Higbee, a banged-up Cooper Kupp, a banged-up Matthew Stafford, quite frankly, and over the hill Matthew Stafford as far as NFL terms go. I think that there has been a lot of stuff done that's been pretty impressive for the Los Angeles Rams this year. The Steelers are off and running. Mitchell Trubisky runs for a first down to get out near midfield for the Pittsburgh Steelers. We see a handoff here on first down to, it is Najee Harris, who gets the Steelers out to about the 47-yard line, second and about 8 there. We'll get back to it in a second. Let's talk about Justin Herbert here for a second, because I feel like he is always, every single year, drafted as a fringe top tier. He's usually the first guy in the second tier as far as quarterbacks go. He has been bit by the injury bug, not necessarily for himself like he was last year, but you think about Mike Williams, you think about Joshua Palmer, you think about Quentin Johnston not being able to get it done, and the running game with Austin Eckler just not being able to get on track, and Brandon Staley saying that Joshua Kelly is going to be involved more this week. I don't know if that's the panacea they're looking for, but we'll see what happens there. Justin Herbert, though, this is a guy that I think you have to start considering, as he is in your 3-down portion of your column here, Dave. This is a guy you have to start considering as, okay, maybe I don't want to play him this week over guys like Purdy, Love, Stafford, stuff like that going forward. It's been bad for Herbert as of late.
And I was on Chris Harris's show this morning, Harris Football, and we talked exactly about this, that Justin Herbert, if you got to bench him, sounds crazy, but it's really not all that crazy. Since Joshua Palmer hit IR, he's been the QB 18 in fantasy. I mean, he's had a few nice weeks here, but he's also had weeks where he has just completely crushed you. Sorry, it's tough doing a show and watching the game at the same time.
I just saw it. Yes.
Yeah, this game's a little more exciting than I think we expected, but
I think it's coming back, but we'll see.
Right.
I think there's defensive holding on New England, but yeah, New England I think it was J.C. Jackson just picked off Mitchell Trubisky, and it seems like the call is going to be defensive holding. It is. Yep. So it's going to be an automatic for first down for Pittsburgh, but I was with you. Hart was skipping beats here, Dave.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
Like I said, these games that we have very low expectations for sometimes end up being kind of fun. But yeah, man, with Justin Herbert, I think you hit a lot of the guys that I have ahead of him this week, but even rest of the season, I'd take Brock Purdy, Justin Fields, Jordan Love, CJ Stroud. It's Justin Herbert. It doesn't feel right to say he's not a top 12 quarterback, but the way that he has been performing with, it's Keenan Allen. And I made the joke earlier, is it going to be Alex Erickson? Is it going to be Stone Smart? Like, there's nobody there besides Keenan Allen. So it's really tough to look at Herbert as anything more than kind of a high-end QB2 right now. And you want to keep starting him because he's got the ceiling. He can go off on any given week, but it's just, it's tough. If you drafted Herbert, you're not feeling good.
How do you feel about Dave? How much Dynasty do you play? Just curiously.
I'm in about a dozen leagues, so not as many as some of the crazy guys, but I'm well versed in Dynasty.
What would you do with Keenan Allen right now in Dynasty?
Oh, I'm absolutely.
I mean, obviously the trade deadline has passed, but like
a lot of Dynasty leagues don't have trade deadlines, so you can still trade. And if you can, if I'm contending, I'm trying to get him. I'm looking at Keenan Allen as a top 5 wide receiver for the rest of the season. But I don't think that Keenan Allen is going to just like magically turn into a ball of dust this offseason either. And I just wrote a collaborative article with Matt Waldman. I don't know if it's been released yet or not, but we talked about Keenan Allen. And that was a guy that I mentioned saying I think he's still going to be a top 24 pick next year, mainly because of Kellen Moore and what Kellen Moore has done to this offense. We're seeing Keenan Allen pull more targets and have more receiving yards per game than he's ever had in his career. Like, we're talking about a very illustrious career for Keenan Allen. And now at age 30, he's having one of his best seasons ever. And it's because of the creative usage. They aren't just lining him up outside and saying, beat your man and we'll get you the ball if you get open. They're using him in pre-snap motion. They're lining him up all over the field. He's playing the X role. He's playing flanker. He's playing in the slot. He's playing out of the backfield. The creative usage for him is exactly what I had envisioned. And I was really high on Keenan Allen this offseason because of the way that I saw Kellen Moore utilize CeeDee Lamb. So, like I said, I don't think that he's just going to disappear. His play style, the way that he avoids contact, his technical abilities as a route runner, next year might be when we start to see him trend down a little bit. But if I'm contending, you could probably get Keenan Allen right now for a second-round pick. And I'm doing that in a heartbeat if I want to try to ride it out for the next 2 or 3 years.
Dave, let me ask you this. This is something I came up with, and nobody told me to do this. I came up with this on my own, and I haven't put it into practice yet. Where do you this is the where do you stand on segment. I don't think I've asked you where do you stand on once. So I'm going to ask you, where do you stand on this right now? Where do you stand on once a running back turned, like coming into his age 27 year, that you sell him? I mean, unless he's like Christian McCaffrey, where he's a unicorn, that you sell him for a first round pick. Where do you stand on that? Prior to turning 28, you get rid of him, but you get a first round pick in return.
It's a tough question. I've always been
okay. Let me narrow it down a little bit. I'm talking about like the difference makers. I'm talking about like the Saquon Barkleys, the Nick Chubbs of the world, not like these also rans. Yeah. Well, yeah, Derrick Henry would be another one, but not like these also rans that were never like, top 5 or top 10. And I know it's a question with some nuance here, but I almost want to apply this like as a blanket over all my dynasty leagues. Like, okay, I know what happens to these running backs once they get into their age 28 year and above. And I feel like if I'm selling on all of them to get that first round pick, I feel like I'm going to win overall in the aggregate more than I lose. Your thoughts?
So I think it depends on the league that you are in. Like, if you are in a league with a lot of really, really sharp people, I think that's why when you want to go out and buy these veterans. And I think that, because so many people like you and I that are super plugged into playing dynasty football, and we have this like, we get terrified when we see a running back turn age 27, that it suppresses the value so much. Or if you're in more of a casual league, like, me and my buddies who I went to high school with, and they aren't as plugged into dynasty. Those are the guys that I'm trying to sell the aging running backs and do things like that. But to give you an example, I'm not going to name names, but I joined a dynasty league this offseason with a lot of really sharp people, very prominent names in the industry. And we're doing a dynasty startup draft. And I started off doing what everybody does in a dynasty startup draft. I take Josh Allen, then I take Justin Fields, then I take Russell Wilson. I get all my quarterbacks. Then I start getting a bunch of young receivers. And then here I am in the 8th round. Derrick Henry's there. So I take Derrick Henry. 9th round, Joe Mixon is there. I take Joe Mixon. And then I just keep getting these aging running backs that everybody else was just kryptonite. Like, I don't know where they would have had to fall to around 18 before people started taking them. And now I'm sitting in this league 12-1, most points scored by a landslide. So, in a normal casual league, Derrick Henry's not falling to the 8th round. Joe Mixon isn't falling to the 9th round. But I think when you're playing with these really sharp guys, they get so scared by aged running backs that I think it has kind of flipped the market a little bit and makes them buys. I don't even know if you need to trade a 1st-round pick for these guys. You can get them for cheaper than that. People just want to get these shiny new toys, the 22, 23, 24-year-old running back, that you can get guys like Derrick Henry and Christian McCaffrey. You can get them for pennies on the dollar compared to what they should be going for.
And on the flip side too, I always call this the Hines-Ward theorem. For many, many years, people told me to sell on Hines Ward and just get rid of him. And then he kept putting up numbers in Pittsburgh year after year after year. So for receivers, like, I'm willing to go into their 30s and still be the bag holder on these guys.
I think it depends. And I know JJ.
I haven't really, I'll put it this way. I haven't really regretted it. It's like anything, Dave, and you know this. There's no foolproof 100%. This is the way. But I feel like more often than not, I've been happier with getting these aging receivers, or keeping these aging receivers is probably more appropriate than flipping them in a draft pick.
And I think it comes down, I know this is a word JJ Zacharyson uses all the time, archetype, like the archetype of the receiver.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of, and I don't try to like put them into 100 different buckets. I kind of look at like the big physical guys that win with their athleticism, and then the guys that are like technicians at what they do. So I am more likely to buy an aging receiver that is in the the Keenan Allen, the Tyler Lockett, the Cooper Kupp.
Yep.
Those guys who are technicians that can get open, that can win at every level of the field, more likely than I am to buy a Deebo Samuel or Julio Jones, these guys that win with their physical prowess, because we do see those guys just fall off a cliff at age 27, 28, 29, 30, where these guys that are better route runners, Larry Fitzgerald, for example, can win deep into their 30s.
Technicians is a great way to put it, because if you were a technician, you already understand how to win, and you know that winning is going to continue even if you lose a step, even if your separation dies down, even if your speed dies down. If you are a technician, you can still be a fantasy worthy starter, definitely fantasy rosterable, but you can still be a fantasy worthy starter. And I think that's the way, that's a good demarcation line to look at when it comes to trading, keeping these receivers or trading for them. I think you hit the nail on the head.
I think
there.
like Devontae Adams and DeAndre Hopkins are two other guys who I think are still going to have another 2, 3, 4 years in the tank, because they aren't winning with just blind athleticism. They are so good at getting open, at the nuances of beating their defenders, that they're still going to have years of production ahead of them.
Yeah, and I look forward to it. As a guy who owns Devontae Adams in way too many dynasty leagues, I look forward to that as well. I look forward to our final segment. We're way up against it. We got about 23 minutes left in the show tonight. He's Dave Kluge from Footballguys. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC, HSFF, our RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown. Let's step out, take a quick break. We got 5:50 to go in the first quarter. Patriots up 7-3 on the Pittsburgh Steelers right now. We're going to cover that for the next quarter. And Dave Kluge is going to tell you about his lineup advice on players like Romeo Doubs, Isaiah Pacheco, Dallas Goedert, Kate Otten, and much more. Fantasy Football Night in America rolls on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show, exclusively on the Better Sports Network.
From the Hometown Hero series, Zach Parise.
That is a very nice card, and that's one I'll probably have to organize a little trade ski with you, because I would actually like that card.
You got downtown Newark in the background. I mean, Newark has never looked so good.
No, it is not.
We'll put that back up on the screen. I just want to have a penny sleeve ready, and yes, we can absolutely work out a little trade ski for that, because that belongs in a Devil Fans collection right there.
I'll trade you the Braden Schneider rookie card for it.
Done.
There we go. The first card for card trade on Rip and Riff history. And it was that easy.
It was that easy. That's because, because neither one of us are jerks. And it's the same thing when we try and do fantasy trades. Like, we don't try and screw each other. We have conversations. If there's a fit, there's a fit. If it's not, it's not. We don't try and take the other one over the barrel. So there you go, in a penny sleeve. Hometown hero, Zach Parise. He was among the league's most productive goal scorers in 06-07, and followed up with a terrific regular season with an even more impressive postseason. And then they talk about what he did in the first round series against Tampa Bay that year. So that's off to the side for you.
That's true. And, if this is it for his career, he had a hell of a career.
He did.
Hopefully he comes back one more year with the Islanders, but if he doesn't, hell of a run.
Looks like we lost Eric here. So what do we want to talk about until Eric comes back? We had a super short break there. I believe he said that we were going to be talking about Romeo Dubs and some other guys. I think we got some start-sit questions here.
Good God, once again. Listen, I don't know what it is. I cannot time this last break of the show right at all. Once again, I am terribly sorry.
On that commercial break, my wife popped her head in my office and said, "Hey, what do we want to order for dinner?" And I had to hit her with I trust your judgment, baby. Whatever you want to get, we're going to eat.
Good for you. Good for you. Trust your wife. That is something I've learned. I've been married for just over 10 years. I have learned to trust my wife on all things, not only dinner, but everything. So, and shout out to my wife, who's actually laid up at home right now with, I don't want to get into it, but some sort of nasty infection on her feet, which I know sounds gross and disgusting, but she's recovering well.
She really appreciates that you are sharing that on here.
She does. Listen, I do 3 shows. Like, I do a ton of radio shows throughout the week. This Thursday is my 3-show day. I do 3 separate shows this day. This is the one that she doesn't watch. So I know I'm cool with revealing whatever tonight. And she'll never find out. Hopefully. We'll see. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to remind you about the Fantasy Alarm All-Pro subscription. You can get it now and unlock all content for all sports, including annual draft guys, one-on-one expert access in the Discord. You can sync up your leagues, analyze matchups and trends in your specific leagues. The lineup generator is integrated with Fanjections. There's daily rankings, weekly rankings, the value vault, position coaches, waiver wire, ownership percentages, projection stats, and tools. Build better lineups guaranteed. Get access to everything Fantasy Alarm offers all year. Just use promo code LOCK at fantasyalarm.com/lock. That's LOCK, fantasyalarm.com/lock. Dallas Goedert, how do you feel about him this week? And I know we talked about this earlier, Dave. If you had a choice between Dallas Goedert and Kyle Pitts this week, which tight end are you checking yes on?
I'm leaning towards Dallas Goedert here. Looks like he's outscoring Pitts by about 2 points per game. And really what it comes down to, I want to start as many people in this Philadelphia-Dallas matchup as I can. It's got the highest over-under of the week. Should be a shootout. Goddard had 50 yards against Dallas in week 9 before he got hurt. So, again, I mean, not trying to overthink it here. I want to start as many Eagles and as many Cowboys as I possibly can.
And you don't have to worry about the Arthur Smith aspect with Dallas Goedert either, which is another big feather in your cap. Did we get this question earlier? I'm just looking at it. Jared Goff or CJ Stroud? Did we get that question earlier in the broadcast? I can't remember right now.
We did not know, but I'm leaning towards CJ Stroud there.
You would say Stroud over Goff, even with the Jets defense and the weather there.
I would, yeah. Goff is, it's something we've been hearing for years, but he does struggle on the road a little bit. Stroud's got a tough matchup against the Jets, but I'm going with him because of the potential ceiling outcome here. I mean, CJ Stroud has just been so good. He's outscoring Goff by over 2 points per game this year. I don't know. This late in the season, I don't want to get too cute, play matchups and all that. Stroud likely got you to a point where you're getting into your fantasy matchup or into your playoffs or where you're trying to secure a win. Even with the matchups, I'm still leaning Stroud here.
You're leaning Stroud. Okay, so that's fine. What about, so this is an interesting one. And obviously anybody who has made it this far in their season, they might have some tough decisions to make at running back. Isaiah Pacheco is a great start this week. So is Rachaad White. Mm-hmm. You may not be able to start both of them. And Pacheco, I know, is a little bit dinged up right now. As I look at the schedule this week, you're looking at Isaiah Pacheco for the Kansas City Chiefs this week, battling the Buffalo Bills at home. That is
another shootout.
Another shootout, potentially, yes. And then Rachaad White is at Atlanta this week, and what probably will not be a shootout. That's a 1 p.m. kickoff on Sunday. Where would you go? Like, I guess I would – you kind of got to roll the dice with Pacheco. I think he's going to be active, but I don't know for sure. Is he worth the dice roll when you got Rachaad White in your back pocket, Dave?
I think so. I mean, Pacheco's been on a tear. If he's active, I think you lean with him here. 25.9 and 21.3 points over his last 2 games. Like we said, the shootout potential here against Buffalo, second highest over and under of the week. Of course, you want to monitor his practice status, look Friday and see what is happening there. I'm just not buying into this. I know somebody, in the chat talks about McKinnon league winner part 2. I hear a lot of people saying it, and a lot of people are expecting it. And
happening, and it keeps happening every year.
I'm just not buying into it this year. I think Pacheco has improved so much. He's a great pass blocker. He's also seen his target share almost quadruple from last year. So he's catching passes now. He's just he's really become a 3-down back, and I think we've waited in years past for this to happen. But McKinnon, from what I've seen this year, doesn't have the juice that he's had in years past. He looks like a 31-year-old running back, and Pacheco looks like a premier running back. I don't see any reason that they're just going to pull the rug out from underneath Pacheco and give his role away when he's been playing really, really well in it.
Right. And I think that's a great, the only thing that would give me pause is obviously the shoulder issue for a guy who runs as violently as Pacheco. But I think you're right. I think he's worth the dice roll here. I would play him over Rachaad White going forward. That may be, and listen, if you're looking really good for your playoff spot and you don't necessarily need this, then I could see why you would play Rachaad White here over Pacheco. But for me, in a vacuum, I would rather play Pacheco than Rachaad White here. Here's a very interesting one.
How about it?
Who was that? I missed it. Who was it? Juju Smith-Schuster. Oh, my God. Over the middle again.
Should have bought the revenge game narrative.
Yeah, we should have. The second coming of Hines Ward / Plaxico Burress / Lynn Swan tonight. Juju Smith-Schuster. Or should I say, probably should say Irving Fryer, Randy Moss, Troy Brown tonight, given what uniform he's wearing. 2.5 minutes to go in the first quarter. Patriots again leading the Steelers by 4, 7-3. Patriots looking to make a move here in Pittsburgh territory as Bailey Zappi throws it away. It'll be 2nd and 10 with 2:23 to go. Here's an interesting one, in my opinion. Christian Watson said to the media today, it's highly unlikely he will be able to go on Monday night against the Giants. Amari Cooper, in my opinion, is highly unlikely to go this week dealing with his injury. So what if you had to make a decision here, Dave Kluge, between Romeo Doubs or Elijah Moore, the de facto number 2 pass catchers for receivers on both these teams? You can only play one. Who's it going to be?
I'm going to go with Elijah Moore here, and that might be the spicy take. I think most people would probably side with Romeo Doubs here. But Jordan Love, we talked about it. Like he's really grown as a quarterback, and what he does well is spread the ball around. We don't know if it's going to Dontavian Wicks or Jaden Reed or Romeo Doubs. I mean, he gets everybody involved. Tucker Kraft is going to be getting it. So I'm going Elijah Moore here. The splits over Elijah Moore's 3-year career, when you look at him playing with Joe Flacco and playing with any other quarterback, it is mind-boggling. He's averaging almost 5 times as many yards per route run with Joe Flacco than he is with other quarterbacks. And last week we saw it in the first game with Joe Flacco. Season high, team high, 12 targets. And we saw a very different usage, right? Early in the season, it was bubble screens, slants, things like that. Last week, he's getting targeted deep downfield. Like, I don't know why. I don't know why Joe Flacco is enamored with Elijah Moore, but he is. We haven't just seen this for one game. We saw it last year with the Jets. We're seeing it now again in the first game they play together in Cleveland. I like Doubs. I think he's a good player, but with the way Love spreads it around and with the way Joe Flacco hyper targets Elijah Moore, I'm going to go with Elijah Moore here. He was my sleeper wide receiver of the week on today's podcast, and I've got him ahead of Romeo Doubs in my rankings.
I'm with you on this. I think it's more. Clearly, Joe Flacco has an affinity for him. And I'll say this about the Packers. There's been a narrative out there. Oh, is Watson the number one? Is it Dobbs? Is it Jaden Reed? We've heard a lot of people talking about Jaden Reed as the receiver you want to play. I don't think they have one in Green Bay. Now, maybe somebody develops over the course of the next couple of years. But I don't think, if Watson's active, it's not necessarily I'm trusting him over Dobbs or Reed. I'm not trusting Reed over the other two. The thing is,
to be for the Packers, to have so
very, very good,
talented year 1 and year 2 guys that we don't even know who our wide receiver 1 is. We got 5 guys that can go out there and do it on any given week. What a spot to be in for Packers fans.
And I think the other thing too is, a lot of people say, oh, it's got to be Jaden Reed based on what he's been doing. Well, yeah, but he's still being dwarfed in snaps by Watson and Dobbs. So it's do you really want to trust that guy? I've talked about this on my local radio show here in Northeast Wisconsin, Dave, about whether it's a good or a bad thing for the Packers not to have a trusted number 1 receiver. And I think the thing that we come back to, and this is pretty obvious, as long as Green Bay's playing well and the offense is playing well and they're winning games, it doesn't really matter if they have a number 1 or if they don't. Maybe that comes into play in the postseason where you need okay, who's the guy I'm going to on 3rd and 8? Is it Dobbs? Is it Musgrave? Is it Watson? they'll figure that out later if they're in that, situation if they need to. But right now,
just curious as a Packers fan, let me ask you real quickly. I'm looking at my rankings. I have Jaden Reed. I've got them ranked: Jaden Reed, Romeo Dubs, Dontavian Wicks. Is that kind of how you would break it down as well, given the edge to Jaden Reed above Dubs, or do you think Dubs is the guy?
Here's the thing. Assuming Watson's out, I would put Reed above. The thing that they do with Reed that they don't do with Dobbs, and they do with Watson, quite frankly, they get him involved in the running game. Like Matt LaFleur will generate these weird, like pitches or like Reed on the jet sweeps or whatever. They don't really do that with Dobbs. And when Dobbs is starving, like it's bad, where he'll get like 2 for 14 or something like that. You don't really run into that with Reed. So maybe Dobbs has the higher ceiling. Maybe, I don't know. But Reed definitely has the higher floor. So that's how I would have him. I would have Reed, Dobbs, and Wicks. That's how I would go.
Wicks was my co-host start of the week. I think, again, there's a lot of talented guys here. And, with the way Love has been playing, we'll start them all.
And Tucker Kraft, we haven't talked about either. Tucker Kraft's been coming on a little bit. I wish they'd throw to him a little bit more, but it is what it is. We were just talking about Elijah Moore. What about David Njoku versus James Cook here? David Njoku, the real-life teammate of Elijah Moore here, going up against James Cook. Let's assume tight end premium scoring. James Cook, the player we all want to happen, he's the fetch of Mean Girls here. We all want James Cook to happen. Hasn't necessarily happened yet. But if you came down to it in tight end premium format, what are you doing here? Well, you play Njoku over James Cook, or is James Cook still the guy you want to play, as you said, in a potential shootout game here this week for Buffalo?
It looked like it was going to happen with David Njoku when Dorian Thompson-Robinson was starting. He was averaging 11 targets per game. Like, that is unbelievable usage for a tight end. But now with Joe Flacco there, that dried up a little bit, and he's not getting that crazy usage anymore. So I'm going with James Cook here. James Cook seems like he has seen much better usage since Ken Dorsey was fired. 16.5 carries, 5.5 targets per game, has completely taken the red zone work away. They were trying to make, you want to talk about trying to make something happen. Ken Dorsey was trying to make Latavius Murray happen in the red zone, and thank God they finally stopped doing that. So James Cook is seeing more carries, he's seeing more targets, and he's finally got a stranglehold on the red zone work. So again, talking about the shootout here, Buffalo and Kansas City, second highest over under the week. We want to target this game as well. Last thing I'll say about James Cook is he's been getting used much more creatively, where they're kind of running him in some routes up the middle and doing things to get him out in space. He was a drop pass away from having a monstrous outing 2 weeks ago as well. I really like what we've seen from James Cook over the last few weeks. So I'm going to lean with him. I'm very bullish on James Cook in my rankings this week.
All right, so it's James Cook over Njoku there. That's a weird running back tight end situation. Let's do another weird wide receiver tight end situation for a matchup that we haven't really talked about either. Well, I guess we talked a little bit of Texans, but if you had the choice between, again, Tank Dell out, which sucks. We love Tank Dell. We hope nothing but the best for him in the coming year. Noah Brown this week, Dave, if you have the situation of starting him or Cade Otton, who is at Atlanta this week, tight end premium scoring, Otton v. Brown, who you got?
That's a tough one. Talks about.
Oh, they're all tough tonight. They're all tough.
And I mean, Cade Otton, you just know exactly what you're getting with him. Like, safe floor, low ceiling. Like, there really isn't much of a ceiling with Cade Otton that we've seen so far this year. Where on the flip side, Noah Brown is kind of the what could he be? We've seen back-to-back 150-yard games. Obviously, the matchup here, though, with the Jets is scary, and we talked about that. The offenses just aren't throwing against the Jets. So I'd lean with Cade Otton here because you're probably guaranteed somewhere between like 12 and 14 points. But Noah Brown, he's the type of guy that can go off for 150 yards as a touchdown. Absolutely not getting that ceiling with Cade Otton, but I'm still going to lean towards Cade Otton just because the tight end premium makes him a little bit safer.
What about let's just talk about the Texans going forward here. Let's look past this Jets game this week, which is probably not going to be great for the Texans. But after that, I mean, with no Tank Dell, is this the Nico Collins and Noah Brown show? Does Dalton Schultz spoil it? Does Brevin Jordan spoil it? Dalton Schultz, and this is the thing I was going to talk about at the top of the show, practice yesterday, gets a DNP today. You never like these midweek downgrades. Does this mean wheels up for Brevin Jordan, Noah Brown, and Nico Collins this week?
Man, I loved Brevin Jordan coming out of Miami. Like when he was like through the draft process, he was a guy that I was just enamored with. Showed some flashes his rookie year, and haven't seen much of anything from him this year. But last week, when they got the ball in his hands, it was like, wow, like why don't they do that more often? Like this Brevin Jordan kid can really play. So I'm hoping that we see it a little bit more. We talked about John Mechie as a guy to stash because he could potentially break out. I mean, Noah Brown, he is what he is. He's been in the league for a while. He's 28 years old or something like that now. Like, I don't know if he's the guy you want to rely on. Robert Woods, is decent at moving the chains and he's good in the pass blocking game and run blocking game, but I don't know if he's a guy you really want to rely on. I think Nico Collins is the guy that we're looking at as a top 12, top 15 guy for the rest of the season. So I think, I'm very confident there, but I'm kind of afraid that without Tank Dell there, we're not going to see anybody step into Tank Dell's shoes. It's going to be the Nico Collins show, and then the ball just kind of getting spread out to everybody else. I think if you had to identify one beneficiary, though, it's probably Dalton Schultz for the rest of the season. I think we see his role expand more than anybody else's.
So our boy Permar99 chiming in on the YouTube chat saying that today was a rest day for Dalton Schultz, which is a possibility. Now he's listed as limited with the hamstring. The thing is, he was so limited with the hamstring on Wednesday, DNP with the hamstring today, which always sets off, red flags and alarms in my mind. You never like the midweek downgrade, but if he's okay, then he's okay. If he does play this week, Dave, does that make it seem like, okay, I love Brevin Jordan, I love the talent, but I can't count on him this week. I'll go with Schultz. I'll go with Brown. I'll go with Nico Collins, but not Brevin Jordan.
I could still see Brevin Jordan finding his way into some slot snaps where Dalton Schultz is more of the inline guy that is going to line up as a traditional tight end. Brevin Jordan's a little bit undersized, and he can play the slot role that Tank Dell was really dominating. So even if Dalton Schultz is healthy, I'm not ready to completely write a Brevin Jordan breakout off the map. It could still potentially happen. Obviously, less likely, but I think Brevin Jordan is a guy who deserves to see more work after what he put on tape last week.
A guy who deserves more mentions, more follows, and more clicks on all the stuff he is doing for footballguys.com is Dave Kluge. You follow him on the X at Dave Kluge. Check out all his work at footballguys.com, including 3 Up, 3 Down this week, which we touched on. We didn't get into everything that I wanted to, but that's okay. You can check it out at footballguys.com. Dave, is there anything I'm missing as far as where to consume more content besides what you alluded to earlier with you and Alfredo pumping out a podcast every single day with Football Guys? Where else is the best way to catch all the media, catch everything that you're doing right now?
Yeah, that's it. Follow me on Twitter if you want to see what I'm doing. I share all my content there, whether it be shows, articles, or just random thoughts that pop into my head. But, if you're going to follow me on Twitter, hopefully you understand, memes and jokes and sarcasm a little bit, because there's a lot of that as well. But yeah, follow me on Twitter. Follow us at youtube.com/footballguys, footballguys.com, all that good stuff.
It's all good. I love it. I'm a huge fan. Thank you so much, Dave. I really appreciate you popping aboard with me. I'll encourage you to watch the rest of the game and enjoy what we can. 7-3, just the start of the second quarter, but the Patriots are threatening. That over is looking very good, my friend.
Yeah, I see it right now, and Zeke just keeps getting these touches. Sure is getting that workhorse role.
Keep feeding Ezekiel Elliott. That's what we're seeing tonight. That's going to do it for us tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Next week, 7 o'clock, Bradley Stalder from Best Bell Fantasy will join me. Check out the weekly challenge at myffpc.com. The Best of the Better Sports Network is up next. Enjoy the rest of the game tonight. I'll see you in the BettorCast. Thanks for watching, everybody.